The boardroom fell into a stunned silence the moment Liam Carter's head slumped against Ava Sinclair's shoulder. 20 executives sat frozen, their presentations forgotten, staring at the impossible sight of the billionaire CEO's most trusted assistant, exhausted beyond comprehension, asleep against her during the quarterly financial review. Ava's expression remained unreadable, her sharp green eyes fixed on the projection screen as if nothing extraordinary was happening. But her hand, which had been poised to take notes, had stopped moving. The tension in that room was suffocating. Everyone knew Ava Sinclair didn't tolerate weakness. She'd fired people for less than being 5 minutes late. And yet, she sat perfectly still, letting him rest. If you want to know how a single moment of collapse became the beginning of something neither of them saw coming, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Liam Carter had stopped counting the hours somewhere around 3 in the morning. He sat at his kitchen table, the blue glow of his laptop screen casting shadows across the stack of unpaid bills that had multiplied like a virus over the past 6 months. Medical expenses from Sophie's pneumonia last winter, the car repair he'd been putting off for 3 months, the daycare fees that kept increasing even though the quality of care seemed to be decreasing. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. His coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, and the financial spreadsheet in front of him refused to balance no matter how many times he rearranged the numbers. The math was simple and brutal. His salary as an executive assistant, even to one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, wasn't enough, not when he was doing it alone. Not when every dollar had to stretch across childcare, rent in a city that treated affordable housing like a fairy tale, and the mountain of debt his ex-wife had left behind when she walked out on their daughter's 2nd birthday. Sophie's baby monitor crackled with her soft breathing from the bedroom. 4 years old and already more resilient than he'd ever been. She never complained when he had to wake her at 5:30 in the morning to drop her at early care before his commute. Never asked why they couldn't afford the toys the other kids had. Never questioned why Daddy was always tired. Liam closed the laptop with more force than necessary. 4:47 a.m. In 43 minutes, his alarm would go off, and this whole circus would start again. He managed 2 hours of sleep that felt like 20 minutes. Quote. The executive offices of Sinclair Technologies occupied the top 15 floors of the Meridian Tower, a glass and steel monument to wealth that pierced the downtown skyline like a declaration of dominance. Liam had been working here for 3 years, and the view from the 62nd floor still made his stomach drop when he looked down at the city stretched out below like a miniature model. He arrived at 7:15 a.m., earlier than required but later than usual. His shirt was wrinkled despite his best efforts with the iron that morning, and he'd cut himself shaving in 3 places because his hands wouldn't stop trembling from exhaustion. The coffee he'd grabbed from the lobby cafe tasted like battery acid, but he drank it anyway, hoping the caffeine would hit his system before Ava arrived. "You look like hell," Marcus Chen said from the doorway of the break room. The senior operations manager had a gift for stating the obvious. "Rough night?" "Rough year," Liam muttered, refilling his cup even though his stomach was already churning. "But who's counting? Ava's been asking about the Donovan portfolio. Did you finish the—" "It's done. Sent it to her at 5 this morning." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You were here at 5? I was home at 5. There's a difference." "Liam, man, you've got to slow down. You're going to burn yourself out." The laugh that escaped Liam's throat sounded harsh even to his own ears. "Slowing down requires options, Marcus. I don't have any." He left the break room before Marcus could respond with whatever well-meaning advice he'd been preparing. The thing about people who'd never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries was that they always thought the solution was simple. Just take a break. Just ask for help. Just relax. Just survive on air and good intentions. Liam's desk sat in the outer office adjacent to Ava's private suite, a position that came with prestige and a workload that would crush most people within 6 months. He'd lasted 3 years through pure stubborn refusal to fail. The stack of folders waiting for him was impressive even by his standards. Contracts requiring review, meeting notes that needed transcription, schedule changes that had come through overnight, and a handwritten note from Ava herself requesting updated projections for the European expansion before the 10 o'clock meeting. It was 7:23 a.m. He had 2 hours and 37 minutes. He opened his laptop and got to work. Ava Sinclair arrived at exactly 8:30 a.m., As she did every morning, her presence announced by the sharp click of heels against marble that made half the office straighten their spines reflexively. She moved through the space like a force of nature, controlled, precise, utterly uncompromising. Her tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than Liam's monthly rent. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that was somehow both severe and elegant, and her green eyes missed absolutely nothing. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said without breaking stride toward her office. "Good morning, Miss Sinclair. Your 8:45 with the board has been moved to 9:15. Senator Morrison's office called to reschedule Thursday's lunch to Friday at 1, and the European projections you requested are in your inbox." She paused at her door, turning to look at him directly for the first time. Her expression was impossible to read, but something in her gaze made Liam acutely aware of the coffee stain on his collar and the fact that he'd forgotten to run a comb through his hair after dropping Sophie at daycare. "You sent those at 5:04 a.m., she said. "Yes, ma'am." "That's 3 hours before your official start time." The work needed to be done. A silence stretched between them that felt heavier than it should. Ava's eyes moved across his face with the same analytical precision she applied to quarterly reports, cataloging details he couldn't hide. The shadows under his eyes, the coffee stains, the barely visible tremor in his hands from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "When did you last take a day off, Mr. Carter?" The question caught him off guard. "I took last Christmas off." "That was 4 months ago, and you worked from home on New Year's Day." "You needed the Singapore contracts reviewed before their business day started." "I needed them reviewed. I didn't specify that you personally had to sacrifice your holiday to do it." She studied him for another long moment, then added quietly, "You're no use to me if you collapse." Before he could formulate a response, she disappeared into her office, the door closing behind her with a decisive click. Liam stared at the closed door, his exhausted brain trying to parse what had just happened. In 3 years of working for Ava Sinclair, she'd never asked about his personal life, never commented on his hours, never shown anything beyond professional acknowledgement of his existence. She was brilliant, demanding, and entirely focused on results. Personal concern didn't fit the pattern. He shook off the strange interaction and returned to his work. The day was just getting started. The quarterly financial review meeting began at 10 a.m. in the main boardroom, a space designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling windows, imported leather chairs, and a table that could seat 30 people comfortably. Today, it held 23 executives, 4 board members, and Ava at the head of the table, commanding the room with the same effortless authority she brought to everything. Liam sat in his usual position along the side wall, laptop open, taking notes and managing the presentation slides as Ava moved through the agenda with ruthless efficiency. His role in these meetings was to be invisible but essential, anticipating needs before they were voiced, keeping the meeting on track, managing the technology that seemed to fail at the worst possible moments. The finance director was presenting third-quarter projections when Liam felt the first wave of dizziness hit. He blinked hard, trying to force his eyes to focus on the screen in front of him, but the numbers kept swimming. He'd skipped breakfast again. The coffee wasn't enough. His last real meal had been, when? Yesterday's lunch? The day before? "Mr. Carter, if you could advance to the next slide." Ava's voice cut through the fog in his brain. He fumbled with the keyboard, his fingers feeling thick and uncooperative. The slide changed, but it took him 3 tries to hit the right key. A few executives glanced in his direction, mild annoyance crossing their faces at the minor disruption. Focus. Just focus. But the room was too warm, the leather chair too comfortable. The voices around him fading into a low hum that sounded almost peaceful after the constant noise in his head for the past few months. He just needed to close his eyes for a second, just 1 second to reset. The next thing Liam knew, his head was resting on something warm and solid that smelled faintly of expensive perfume, and his entire body had gone slack with exhaustion. For one blissful moment, his brain didn't register anything wrong. He was comfortable. He was resting. The chaos had finally stopped. Then awareness came crashing back. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Not the productive silence of people focused on work, but the shocked silence of people witnessing something they couldn't quite believe. Liam's eyes snapped open, and the reality of his situation hit him like ice water. He'd fallen asleep during a meeting, with his head resting on Ava Sinclair's shoulder. Horror flooded through him as he jerked upright, nearly knocking his laptop off the table in his haste. 23 pairs of eyes were locked on him with expressions ranging from shock to schadenfreude. Ava sat perfectly still beside him. When had he moved to sit beside her? Her expression unreadable, but her posture rigid. His voice came out as a croak. Ms. Sinclair, I'm so sorry. I don't know what... This meeting is adjourned, Ava said, her voice cutting through his stammered apology with absolute authority. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mr. Carter, my office. Now. She stood and walked out of the boardroom without waiting for a response, leaving 23 executives staring at Liam like he was a dead man walking. Marcus caught his eye from across the table, his expression a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. Liam gathered his laptop with shaking hands and followed Ava out, each step feeling like he was walking toward his execution. In 3 years, he'd never made a mistake like this, never given her reason to question his professionalism. And now he'd humiliated her in front of the entire senior leadership team by literally falling asleep on her shoulder. He was done, finished. And he had no idea how he was going to explain to Sophie why Daddy lost his job. Ava's office was a study in controlled elegance. Minimalist furniture, perfectly organized desk, windows that offered a view of the city that probably cost more per month than most people's mortgages. She stood at those windows now, her back to him, her posture so still she could have been carved from marble. Liam stood just inside the door, his laptop clutched against his chest like a shield, waiting for the axe to fall. Close the door, Ava said without turning around. He did, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. Sit. He sat in one of the chairs facing her desk, his mind racing through apologies and explanations that all sounded pathetic, even in his own head. I'm sorry seemed inadequate for falling asleep on your boss during a meeting. It won't happen again. Rang hollow when he had no idea how to prevent it short of mainlining espresso directly into his veins. Ava finally turned from the window, but instead of sitting behind her desk in the position of power, she surprised him by taking the chair beside his, close enough that he could see the exact shade of green in her eyes, the tiny line between her eyebrows that suggested she was working through something complicated. How much sleep did you get last night? She asked. The question was so unexpected that Liam answered honestly. 2 hours. Maybe. The night before? 3. The night before that? He couldn't remember. The past few weeks had blurred into one long stretch of exhaustion. I'm not sure. When did you last eat a full meal? Miss Sinclair, I really am sorry. Answer the question, Mr. Carter. Her voice wasn't angry. It was something else, something he couldn't quite identify because he'd never heard it from her before. He tried to remember his last real meal and came up empty. I don't know, he admitted quietly. Ava leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving his face. You're burning out. I'm fine. Today was just... You fell asleep on my shoulder in a meeting with 23 executives and 4 board members. You're not fine. She paused, then added in a tone that was somehow both sharp and concerned, and apparently you haven't been fine for quite some time. Why didn't you say something? Because saying something required having options. Because asking for help felt like admitting defeat. Because he was barely keeping his head above water, and the moment he stopped swimming, he'd drown. I can handle it, he said instead. Clearly. The single word landed like a slap, and Liam felt heat rise in his face. She was right. He'd proven exactly how well he was handling things by passing out during a board meeting. I'll submit my resignation effective immediately, he said, the words tasting like ash. I understand that what happened today was completely unacceptable and... Stop! Ava held up one hand, her expression sharp. I didn't call you in here to accept your resignation. I called you in here because I need to understand what's happening before one of my best employees works himself into a hospital bed. Best employees. The words registered somewhere in his exhausted brain, but he couldn't quite process them. Ava Sinclair didn't give compliments. She gave feedback, corrections, and expectations. Praise wasn't part of her vocabulary. I have a 4-year-old daughter, Liam heard himself say, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Her mother left 2 years ago, walked out on her 2nd birthday, and I haven't heard from her since. I'm doing this alone and it's expensive, And I can't afford to slow down because if I slow down, I can't pay for daycare. And if I can't pay for daycare, I can't work. And if I can't work, he stopped himself, horrified that he'd just vomited his entire personal crisis onto his boss. But Ava's expression hadn't changed to pity or discomfort. She just listened with the same focused attention she gave to quarterly reports. "You're a single parent," she said. "Yes. And you've been managing this job in full custody of a preschooler while dealing with financial difficulties." "I'm managing," he said, though the word felt increasingly hollow. "You're drowning," Ava corrected, "and you're too stubborn to ask for a life preserver." She stood and moved to her desk, pulling up something on her computer with quick, efficient keystrokes. Liam watched her, his brain too fried to predict where this was going. "Effective immediately, your hours are reduced to 8-hour days, 40 hours per week maximum," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "No more weekend work unless it's a genuine emergency, and those will be compensated with additional overtime and comp time. Your salary remains the same." "Ms. Sinclair, I can't." "You can, and you will." Additionally, the company provides childcare assistance for employees with dependents. I'm not sure why you never applied for it, but I'm enrolling you in the program as of today. It covers 70% of daycare cost. Liam stared at her, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "There's a childcare assistance program?" "It's in the employee handbook, page 47. I didn't know," which is a failure on HR's part for not communicating it properly. She made a note on her screen. "I'll be addressing that. In the meantime, you're going home." "It's barely 11. You're going home, Mr. Carter. You're going to sleep for however many hours your body needs. You're going to eat actual food, and you're going to spend time with your daughter. Tomorrow you'll come in at 9 a.m., not 7:15, and we'll discuss a realistic workload distribution." It was too much. The sudden shift from expecting termination to receiving what felt like actual help. Liam felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd been building brick by brick for 2 years to keep everything contained. "Why?" The question came out raw. "Why are you doing this?" Ava met his eyes directly, and for just a moment her carefully controlled mask slipped enough for him to see something underneath, something that looked almost like understanding. "Because I've spent the last 3 years watching you be better at this job than anyone has a right to be," she said quietly. "You're precise, you anticipate problems before they develop, and you've never once made an error that mattered. Until today, when you were literally too exhausted to keep your eyes open. That tells me the problem isn't your competence or your commitment. The problem is that you're trying to do an impossible job with inadequate support." She closed her laptop and stood, her professional mask sliding back into place. "I don't accept failure from my team, Mr. Carter, and I don't accept watching talented people destroy themselves trying to meet standards that weren't designed for their circumstances. So we're going to adjust the circumstances. Go home." Liam stood on shaking legs, his mind reeling. "Thank you" seemed inadequate, but it was all he had. "Don't thank me yet," Ava said, but there was something almost like warmth in her voice. "I'm going to be asking you to actually maintain boundaries, which I suspect will be harder for you than working 100-hour weeks. Now go, before I change my mind." He made it to the door before her voice stopped him. "Mr. Carter?" He turned back. "That thing that happened in the boardroom," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "We're not going to discuss it. It didn't happen. Understood?" "Understood." But as Liam left her office and headed for the elevator, he couldn't shake the image of that moment. Her complete stillness as he'd slept on her shoulder, the way she'd ended the meeting without anger, just efficiency. She could have humiliated him, could have fired him on the spot. Instead, she'd created space for him to recover without making him feel like a charity case. He didn't understand Ava Sinclair, but for the first time in 2 years, he felt like maybe he didn't have to do this alone. The apartment was quiet when he got home at noon, sunlight streaming through the windows he usually only saw in darkness. Liam stood in his kitchen and looked at the space with fresh eyes, the stack of unpaid bills still on the table, the dishes in the sink from 3 days ago, Sophie's toys scattered across the living room floor because he'd been too tired to ask her to clean up. This was his life, chaos and exhaustion and constant juggling. But maybe it didn't have to be quite this impossible. He pulled out his phone and called the daycare, asking about the company assistance program Ava had mentioned. The director, Mrs. Patterson, sounded surprised but pleased. Oh yes, Sinclair Technologies has an excellent childcare partnership with us. I'm surprised you haven't enrolled before. It would save you over $800 a month. $800. That was the car repair, the overdue electric bill, and groceries for 2 weeks. Can you send me the enrollment forms? Liam asked, his voice not quite steady. I'll email them right now. After he hung up, Liam sat at his kitchen table, the same table where he'd been drowning in bills just 12 hours ago, and felt something unfamiliar wash over him. Not quite hope, because he'd learned not to trust hope, but maybe possibility. Maybe the idea that he didn't have to choose between being a good father and being good at his job. Maybe he could find a way to be both. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Dude, are you alive? The office is going insane with rumors about what happened in that meeting. Liam typed back. Still employed, still breathing. Tell everyone to calm down. You fell asleep on the Ice Queen and lived to tell about it. You're a legend. Liam smiled despite himself, then set the phone aside. He had 7 hours before he needed to pick up Sophie. 7 hours to sleep, to eat, to maybe figure out how to start fixing the mess his life had become. He made it to the bedroom, set an alarm, and fell into bed without even taking off his shoes. For the first time in months, when sleep came, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was rest. He icked. The office the next morning felt different, though Liam couldn't quite put his finger on why. Maybe it was the fact that he'd arrived at 8:45 instead of 7:15 and the world hadn't ended. Maybe it was the 8 hours of sleep he'd actually gotten. Or maybe it was the way people's eyes followed him as he walked to his desk, a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been respect. Marcus intercepted him at the coffee station. You're trending, he said without preamble. I'm what? Trending. As in, everyone in this building has an opinion about what happened yesterday. Half the office thinks Ava's gone soft. The other half thinks you've got blackmail material. And a very small, very foolish minority thinks you two are... Don't! Liam cut him off, heat rising in his face. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Marcus raised his hands in surrender. Hey, I'm just reporting what I'm hearing. But seriously, man, are you okay? That whole thing in the meeting was intense. I'm fine, just needed sleep. And Ava didn't fire you? Shockingly, no. She actually helped you. Liam poured his coffee, measuring his words carefully. She made some adjustments to my workload and pointed me toward resources I didn't know existed, that's all. But Marcus's expression suggested it wasn't all to anyone who'd witnessed Ava Sinclair's typical management style. She didn't make adjustments. She didn't point people toward resources. She expected excellence and removed obstacles or people who couldn't deliver. What she'd done for Liam was unprecedented, and apparently everyone in the office had noticed. Just be careful, Marcus said quietly. People are watching, and not all of them are friendly. Before Liam could ask what that meant, Ava's voice cut through the office noise. Mr. Carter, do you have the Morrison file ready? She stood at her office door, professional and distant, as if yesterday had never happened. Back to business as usual. On your desk, Ms. Sinclair, he replied, matching her tone. She disappeared back into her office without acknowledgement, and Liam returned to his desk, acutely aware of the eyes still tracking his movements. The day proceeded normally. Meetings, calls, the constant flow of tasks that kept Sinclair Technologies running. But at exactly 5 p.m., Liam's computer chimed with a calendar reminder. End of workday. He stared at it, confused. He'd never set that reminder. A second message popped up, this one from Ava's calendar. Mr. Carter is off duty. All non-emergency communication should be directed to the evening shift. Evening shift. There was an evening shift he'd never known about because he'd always been the evening shift, working until 8 or 9 or sometimes midnight when things got intense. Liam looked up to find Ava watching him through her office window. When their eyes met, she gave him a single, decisive nod, then returned to her work. The message was clear. Go home to your daughter. So he did. Sophie launched herself at him when he picked her up from daycare at 5:30, her small arms wrapping around his neck with the kind of uncomplicated joy that made every exhausted moment worth it. Daddy, you're early. I am, he agreed, holding her close. I thought maybe we could go to the park before dinner. Would you like that? Her squeal of delight was answer enough. They spent 2 hours at the playground, Sophie narrating elaborate adventures involving the slide being a dragon's tail and the swings being magic carpets. Liam pushed her higher and higher, her laughter echoing across the park, and felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in months. This was why he was fighting so hard. Not just to survive, but to give her moments like this. Childhood without shadows, joy without guilt. "Daddy?" Sophie asked as they walked home hand in hand, the setting sun painting the sky orange and pink. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because you smile more today. You looked tired before. Now you look lighter." 4 years old and already reading him like a book. Liam knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I am happier today," he admitted. "Things at work got better, and I get to spend more time with you. That makes me very happy." "Is it because of the lady boss?" Liam blinked. "What?" "Mrs. Patterson said the lady boss at your work is helping us. Is she nice?" How did he explain Ava Sinclair to a 4-year-old? She wasn't nice in the traditional sense. She was brilliant, demanding, occasionally terrifying, and apparently willing to restructure an employee's entire work life to prevent burnout. "She's fair," Liam said finally. "And yes, she's helping us. We should be grateful for that. Can I draw her a thank you picture?" The image of Ava Sinclair's reaction to receiving a crayon drawing from a preschooler made Liam smile despite himself. "I think she'd like that very much." They made dinner together, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and vegetables, and Sophie chattered about her day at daycare while Liam actually had the energy to listen and engage instead of counting down minutes until bedtime. After dinner, she drew her thank you picture with intense concentration. A stick figure woman with yellow hair. Ava's hair was dark brown, but artistic license was allowed, standing next to a smaller stick figure labeled Daddy and an even smaller one labeled Me. "She's smiling," Sophie explained, pointing to the curved line that represented Ava's mouth. "Because happy people smile." Liam looked at the drawing and felt something complex move through his chest. Ava Sinclair didn't smile often. Her default expression was controlled neutrality, occasionally shifting to sharp focus, or, rarely, satisfaction. But Sophie had drawn her smiling, because in Sophie's world, people who helped others were happy. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was something in Ava beyond the Ice Queen exterior that found satisfaction in solving problems, even messy human ones. He folded the picture carefully and tucked it in his work bag for tomorrow. But the next morning, Liam arrived at 8:45 again, the new rhythm already starting to feel less foreign. He found Ava already at her desk, working through something on her computer with the focused intensity she brought to everything. "Good morning, Ms. Sinclair," he said from her doorway. "Mr. Carter?" She didn't look up. "The Donovan team wants to move their presentation to Friday. Please reschedule and notify all participants." "Already done. It went out at 8:30. Now she did look up, one eyebrow raised slightly. "Efficient. I've had more sleep. It helps." Was that almost a smile? It was hard to tell with Ava, but something softened in her expression for just a moment before the professional mask returned. "My daughter wanted to give you something," Liam said, pulling out Sophie's drawing before he could second-guess himself. "As a thank you, for the Child Care Assistance Program." He placed the paper on her desk, suddenly feeling ridiculous. Ava Sinclair ran a multi-billion-dollar technology company. She didn't need crayon drawings from preschoolers. But Ava picked up the drawing carefully, studying it with the same attention she gave to financial reports. Her eyes moved across the stick figures, the bright colors, the carefully written thank you in Sophie's uneven letters. "She made you smile," Ava said quietly, her finger tracing the curved line of the stick figure's mouth. "She believes happy people smile," Liam explained, "and people who help others are happy." Simple logic. Children tend to see things clearly. Ava was quiet for a long moment, still looking at the drawing. When she finally spoke, her voice carried something Liam had never heard from her before, something almost vulnerable. "Tell your daughter thank you, and that I'll keep this somewhere safe." She opened her desk drawer, the one Liam had never seen her open in 3 years, and placed the drawing inside carefully, as if it were something precious. The moment stretched between them, unusual and weighted with something neither of them quite knew how to name. Then Ava's phone rang, shattering the silence, and they both retreated into professionalism like it was armor. But for the rest of that day, Liam found himself watching Ava differently. Not as the ice queen who demanded perfection, not as the brilliant CEO who terrified half the business world. As a person who'd carefully preserved a child's drawing in her desk drawer. As someone who'd taken the time to help an employee she barely knew beyond his work product. As someone who maybe understood loneliness in her own way. And he wondered, not for the first time, what it cost Ava Sinclair to be Ava Sinclair. The whispers started on Thursday. Liam noticed them first in the break room, where conversations died the moment he walked in. Then in the hallways where groups of employees would glance his way and lean closer together, their voices dropping to murmurs he couldn't quite catch. By Friday afternoon, the atmosphere in the office had shifted from curious to something darker, something that made the back of his neck prickle with unease. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on his work, on the fact that he was sleeping again, that Sophie was happier, that the financial pressure had eased enough for him to breathe. But the weight of those stares followed him everywhere. Marcus cornered him at his desk just before 5. "We need to talk," he said, keeping his voice low. "Not here, coffee shop across the street. 20 minutes. "Marcus, I need to pick up Sophie. This is important, Liam. Trust me." Something in Marcus's expression made Liam's stomach drop. He texted Mrs. Patterson asking if Sophie could stay an extra half hour, got an affirmative response, and met Marcus at the coffee shop with a growing sense of dread. Marcus waited until they were seated in a corner booth, far from other customers, before he spoke. "There's a rumor going around," he said without preamble. "About you and Ava." Liam felt ice spread through his chest. "What kind of rumor?" "The kind that suggests the reason she didn't fire you after the boardroom incident is because you two are involved, romantically." "That's insane. I work for her, that's it." "I know that, you know that. But perception is reality in corporate politics. And right now, the perception is that Ava Sinclair, who has never shown personal interest in any employee ever, suddenly restructured your entire job, enrolled you in programs you didn't know existed, and is protecting you from consequences that would have ended anyone else's career." Marcus leaned forward. "People are asking why. And when people don't have facts, they fill in the gaps with fiction." Liam's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Who's spreading this?" "Does it matter? It's everywhere. HR has apparently received 3 anonymous complaints about favoritism. The board is asking questions. And Ava—" Marcus paused. "Ava is going to hear about this if she hasn't already. When she does, she's going to have to respond. And that response might not be in your favor." The implications settled over Liam like a shroud. Everything Ava had done to help him, the schedule changes, the childcare assistance, the protection, could be twisted into something ugly. And in trying to keep him from drowning, she'd opened herself up to scrutiny that could damage her reputation. "What do I do?" he asked. Marcus's expression was sympathetic but firm. "You distance yourself, publicly. You go back to the way things were before, professional, formal, no special treatment, and you hope it's enough to kill the rumors before they kill your career. But the schedule changes can be maintained quietly. It's not about the actual arrangements, Liam. It's about optics. Right now the optics are terrible." Liam left the coffee shop feeling sick. He picked up Sophie in a daze, barely hearing her excited chatter about the art project they'd done at daycare. At home, he went through the motions of dinner and bath time and bedtime stories, but his mind kept circling back to the same thought. He'd brought this down on Ava. His weakness, his inability to handle his own life without help, had turned her professional courtesy into office scandal. He needed to fix this. But he had no idea how. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Liam got to the office at 8:45, maintaining his new schedule, and immediately felt the change in atmosphere. The curious stares had turned into something colder, judgmental. 2 junior executives who usually greeted him in the elevator rode in silence, their eyes fixed on the floor numbers as if they were fascinating. When he reached his desk, he found an email from HR requesting a meeting at 10 a.m. No explanation, no context, just the time and room number. Ava arrived at her usual time, her expression unreadable as always, but Liam thought he detected something tighter in her posture. She didn't acknowledge him beyond a professional nod as she passed his desk, and for the first time since he'd started working for her, she closed her office door completely. The message was clear. Distance. Professional boundaries. Exactly what Marcus had said. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. The HR meeting was worse than he'd imagined. Jennifer Moss, the HR director, sat across from him with a manila folder and an expression that radiated corporate concern, masking personal distaste. "Mr. Carter, we've received several complaints regarding your conduct with Miss Sinclair," she began, her voice professionally neutral. "Specifically, concerns about inappropriate personal relationships affecting professional judgment." "There is no personal relationship," Liam said, keeping his voice level despite the anger rising in his chest. "Ms. Sinclair made schedule adjustments based on performance concerns and pointed me toward employee resources that I was eligible for but hadn't accessed. That's it. The perception among your colleagues is different. Then my colleagues need better hobbies than inventing office drama." Jennifer's expression hardened. "Mr. Carter, I'm not here to debate the validity of these concerns. I'm here to inform you that this situation has created a hostile work environment and put both you and Ms. Sinclair in a compromising position." "A compromising position," Liam repeated slowly. "I fell asleep during a meeting because I was working myself into exhaustion, and instead of firing me like anyone expected, she helped me find resources to prevent burnout. How is that compromising?" "Because it suggests favoritism. Because Ms. Sinclair has never extended such considerations to any other employee. And because the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety in a corporate environment." Liam felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you asking me to do?" Jennifer opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "We're suggesting a lateral transfer to a different department. Same salary, same benefits, but you'd report to someone other than Ms. Sinclair. It would eliminate the conflict and allow both of you to maintain your positions without ongoing scrutiny. You're separating us because people are gossiping. We're addressing a situation that could expose the company to liability and damage Ms. Sinclair's professional reputation. This is the cleanest solution." Liam looked at the transfer paperwork without touching it. 6 months ago, he would have signed immediately. Anything to keep his job, to maintain the income he desperately needed. But something had shifted in the past 2 weeks. He'd seen a different side of Ava Sinclair, not just the demanding CEO, but the person who'd carefully preserved a child's crayon drawing, who'd taken the time to understand his situation instead of just replacing him, who'd shown him that asking for help wasn't weakness, and now the office gossip mill wanted to punish her for basic human decency. "I need to think about it," he said. "Mr. Carter, I understand the situation, Ms. Moss. But this is my career and my livelihood. I'm not signing anything without considering all the implications. Give me 48 hours. Jennifer's expression suggested this wasn't the response she'd been expecting, but she couldn't legally force him to decide immediately. "Very well, but I need an answer by Wednesday at 5 p.m. And in the meantime, I strongly suggest maintaining strict professional distance from Ms. Sinclair." Liam left the HR office feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. The elevator ride back to the 62nd floor felt longer than usual, each floor a reminder that he was trapped between impossible choices. Take the transfer and lose the best professional relationship he'd ever had. Refuse the transfer and watch Ava's reputation get shredded by gossip. He made it back to his desk and sat down heavily, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. "Mr. Carter." Ava's voice came from her office doorway, controlled but with an edge he'd never heard before. "My office. Now." His stomach dropped. She knew. Of course she knew. HR would have briefed her on the situation. He stood and walked into her office, closing the door behind him as she moved to stand by her windows. The same position she'd taken the day she'd told him he was burning out. "I assume you've had your meeting with HR," she said without turning around. "Yes, ma'am." "And they offered you a transfer?" "Yes." "Are you going to take it?" The question was delivered in the same neutral tone she used for everything, but Liam heard something underneath it. Not quite vulnerability, but close. As if his answer mattered beyond professional logistics. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I told them I needed time to think." Ava finally turned to face him, and he was struck by how tired she looked. Not physically exhausted like he'd been, but worn down in a different way. The weight of maintaining that Ice Queen facade, perhaps, or the cost of caring in an environment that punished emotional investment. "You should take it," she said flatly. "What?" "The transfer. You should take it. It's the smart play. Liam stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who'd restructured his life to keep him from collapsing with the one now telling him to leave. You want me to transfer? I want you to protect your career. These rumors will destroy you if you stay. At least in another department, you'll have distance, credibility, a chance to rebuild your reputation without the shadow of alleged impropriety. And what about your reputation? Something flickered in Ava's expression. Surprise, maybe, that he'd considered her position at all. My reputation can withstand gossip. It always has. But it shouldn't have to, Liam said, feeling anger rise in his chest. You helped an employee access programs they were entitled to. You prevented someone from working themselves into a hospital. That's not favoritism. That's basic management. Why should either of us be punished for that? Because the world doesn't care about context. It cares about narrative. And right now, the narrative is that I showed you special treatment. Ava's voice was sharp, clinical. That narrative damages both of us. The transfer ends it. By confirming that we did something wrong, by letting the gossips win, by being pragmatic about corporate reality. No, Liam said, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. By being a coward. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Ava's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Liam thought he'd crossed a line that would cost him everything. You think I'm being a coward, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I think you're protecting me at your own expense, again, and I think you're doing it because you don't believe you deserve to have people in your corner. Liam took a breath, knowing he was probably ending his career but unable to stop. You've spent so long being the Ice Queen that everyone expects you to sacrifice personal connections for professional perfection. But that's not strength, Miss Sinclair. That's loneliness disguised as power. The silence that followed was absolute. Ava stared at him with an expression he couldn't read, her controlled facade cracking just enough for him to see something raw underneath. You don't know anything about my life, she said finally. You're right, I don't, because you don't let anyone close enough to know. But I know what I saw when you kept that drawing, and I know what it meant when you helped me instead of firing me. You're not as cold as you pretend to be. Stop. Why? Because it's uncomfortable? Because it's easier to push me away than to admit that maybe, just maybe, you care about something beyond quarterly earnings? Mr. Carter, my name is Liam. You know my name. You know my daughter's name. You know more about my life than anyone in this building except Marcus, and that's because you took the time to ask. So stop hiding behind titles and tell me the truth. Do you want me to take this transfer? Ava opened her mouth, closed it, then turned back to the window. Her shoulders were rigid, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that screamed control. But when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. No. The admission felt like a crack in a dam. Liam waited, giving her space to continue. I don't want you to transfer, Ava said, still facing the window. You're the best assistant I've ever had. You understand how I work. You anticipate problems. You make my job easier in ways that no one else ever has. But more than that, she paused, and Liam saw her shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. You made me remember that the people who work for me are actually people, with lives and problems and children who draw pictures. I'd forgotten that. Or maybe I deliberately stopped seeing it because it's easier to demand perfection from employees than from human beings. She turned to face him then, and her expression was more open than he'd ever seen it. But if you stay, they're going to tear you apart, she continued. They'll question every decision I make regarding you. Every project assignment, every deadline extension, every single interaction will be scrutinized for evidence of favoritism. And eventually that scrutiny will damage your career in ways that no amount of competence can overcome. So we let them win, Liam said. We let the gossips dictate our professional lives because standing up to them is too hard. It's not about hard, it's about realistic. It's about being afraid. The words came out harsher than he intended, but Liam didn't take them back. You're afraid that if you fight this, people will see you as weak, as someone who cares more about an employee than about maintaining your reputation as the untouchable CEO. But you know what's actually weak? Running away from the truth because other people might judge you for it. Ava's eyes flashed with something that looked like anger, but underneath it, Liam saw fear. Real, genuine fear of being seen, of being vulnerable. You have no idea what you're asking me to risk, she said. Then tell me. Explain what I'm missing. Because from where I'm standing, the only thing at risk is a reputation built on pretending you don't have a heart. The laugh that escaped Ava's throat was bitter. You think my reputation is pretend? You think I built this company, fought through a male-dominated industry, survived hostile takeovers and board challenges by being soft, by caring what people thought of me? No. But I think you're so used to fighting that you've forgotten there's a difference between enemies and allies. I'm not trying to damage you, Ms. Sinclair. I'm trying to... He stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. Trying to what? Ava pressed, taking a step closer. Save me? Protect me? I don't need saving, Mr. Carter. I've been taking care of myself since I was 16 years old. Everyone needs saving sometimes. You proved that when you helped me. That was different. How? Because you were collapsing. You needed intervention. And you don't? Liam challenged. You don't need someone to tell you that isolating yourself behind professional walls isn't strength, it's survival mode. That maybe, just maybe, you deserve to have people who give a damn about you beyond your ability to generate revenue? Ava stared at him, and for a moment, Liam saw her mask completely slip. Underneath the Ice Queen was someone exhausted, someone lonely, someone who'd spent so long being strong for everyone else that she'd forgotten how to let anyone be strong for her. I can't, she whispered, and it sounded like a confession. I can't be that person, the one who needs, the one who cares. I built this company by being harder than everyone else, smarter, more ruthless. If I start showing weakness, it's not weakness to be human. In my world, it is. Ava's voice cracked slightly. In my world, the moment you care about something, someone uses it against you. Every time I've let my guard down, I've paid for it. So yes, I'm afraid. I'm terrified of what happens if I let you stay and people see that you matter to me beyond your job performance. Because the moment they see that, they'll use it to tear me apart. The honesty in her voice hit Liam like a physical blow. He'd seen Ava Sinclair command boardrooms, negotiate billion-dollar deals, and reduce grown men to stammering apologies with a single look. But he'd never seen her like this, raw and real and scared. Then we don't give them the ammunition, he said quietly. We maintain professional boundaries at work. No special treatment, no visible favoritism. But we also don't run away. We do our jobs, we do them well, and we let our work speak for itself. And if that's not enough, then we deal with it, together. But we don't make decisions based on fear of what other people might think. Ava closed her eyes, and Liam could almost see the war happening behind them. The battle between the woman who'd learned to survive alone and the person who maybe, finally, wanted something different. When she opened her eyes again, something had shifted in her expression, not quite hope, but perhaps possibility. If we do this, she said carefully, there are rules, non-negotiable rules. I'm listening. At work, we are strictly professional. You call me Ms. Sinclair. I call you Mr. Carter. No personal conversations in the office, no closed-door meetings that aren't strictly business, no falling asleep on your shoulder, Liam finished with a slight smile. The corner of Ava's mouth twitched in what might have been almost a smile. That would be advisable to avoid, yes. And outside of work? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them had quite acknowledged yet. Ava's expression shifted to something Liam couldn't quite read. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe we should start. Mr. Carter, Liam, when we're alone, when we're being honest, I'm Liam, and you're... He paused, realizing he'd never actually heard anyone use Ava Sinclair's first name as anything other than a title. What do people who actually know you call you? No one knows me well enough to call me anything but Ava or Ms. Sinclair. The admission was matter-of-fact, but it landed like a weight in Liam's chest. 30 years old, running a multi-billion-dollar company, and no one knew her well enough to have a personal name for her. That's incredibly sad, he said softly. Ava's shoulders tensed. It's reality. It doesn't have to be. Liam. The sound of his name in her voice was different, less formal. I'm not good at this. At personal. At letting people in. I don't know how to be someone's... She stopped, searching for the word. Friend, he offered. Is that what you want? Friendship? It was a fair question, and Liam found himself without a clear answer. What did he want from Ava Sinclair? Professional respect, certainly. They had that already. But there was something else building between them. Something that had started when he'd woken up on her shoulder and she'd chosen to help instead of fire him. Something that felt like connection in a way he hadn't experienced in years. I want honesty, he said finally. I want to stop pretending that you're just my boss and I'm just your employee when we both know there's more to it than that. I don't know what more means yet, but I'd like the chance to find out. Ava studied him for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly working through variables and risks. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? Okay, we'll try. But Liam, I need you to understand something. Her voice was serious, almost grave. I'm not easy to know. I'm controlled and cold, and I have walls that most people can't get past because I built them specifically to keep people out. If you're expecting me to suddenly become warm and open, you're going to be disappointed. I don't want you to be someone you're not, Liam said. I just want you to stop pretending that the person who saved Sophie's drawing doesn't exist. Something shifted in Ava's expression. Softness, perhaps, or maybe just acknowledgement. That person is complicated. So is the single father who works for her. We'll figure it out. Ava moved back to her desk, her posture straightening into something more formal. The moment of vulnerability was passing, her professional armor sliding back into place. But before it could fully close, she looked at him with an expression that was almost vulnerable. Don't take the transfer, she said quietly. Stay. We'll handle whatever comes. Liam nodded, feeling relief and terror in equal measure. I'll tell HR tomorrow. Good. Ava pulled up something on her computer, signaling the end of the conversation. But as Liam turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Liam? He looked back. Thank you for not letting me take the easy way out. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was profound. Liam smiled. Someone recently told me that asking for help isn't weakness. I figured the same applies to accepting it. This time, Ava did smile. Small, barely there, but genuine. Get back to work, Mr. Carter. Yes, ma'am. Nod. The next morning, Liam walked into Jennifer Moss's office with a decision that felt both terrifying and right. I'm declining the transfer, he said, remaining standing even though she gestured to a chair. I appreciate the offer, but I'm staying in my current position. Jennifer's expression hardened. Mr. Carter, I strongly advise you to reconsider. The situation with Ms. Sinclair is based on rumors and speculation, not facts, Ms. Sinclair helped me access employee resources I was entitled to. That's not favoritism, that's her job as a manager. And if this office has a problem with managers actually supporting their employees, that says more about the culture here than about our professional relationship. The board has concerns, then the board can address those concerns with Miss Sinclair directly. But I'm not being pushed out of a position I've earned because people don't have anything better to do than gossip. Liam kept his voice level but firm. I've been doing this job for 3 years. My performance reviews are excellent. My work speaks for itself. If anyone has actual evidence of impropriety, I'm happy to address it. But I'm not accepting punishment based on office rumors. Jennifer looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You realize this could make things harder for you. I'm aware. And you're willing to deal with the consequences. I am, she sighed, making a note in her folder. Very well. But Mr. Carter, understand that this office will be watching. Any hint of actual favoritism, any proof that supports these concerns, and we won't be offering transfers. We'll be discussing termination. Understood. Is there anything else? No, you're dismissed. Liam left the HR office feeling like he'd just fought a battle. Not won it exactly, but at least held his ground. When he got back to his desk, he found Ava watching him through her office window. Their eyes met, and she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. They'd made their choice. Now came the hard part, living with it. The office gossip didn't stop, but it changed. Where before there had been speculation and rumor, now there was watching, waiting, looking for proof to confirm their theories. Liam felt eyes on him constantly, measuring every interaction with Ava for signs of impropriety. So they gave them nothing to see. At work, Liam and Ava maintained perfect professional distance. Their conversations were about schedules and projects and nothing else. When they passed in the hallway, they acknowledged each other with the same neutral courtesy Ava showed everyone. In meetings, Liam sat in his usual position along the wall, took notes, managed presentations, and never once gave any indication that he and Ava were anything beyond boss and employee. It was exhausting, every word measured, every interaction calculated. But it was working. Slowly, the whispers died down. People lost interest when there was no scandal to uncover. But outside of work, things were different. It started small. Ava asking if his daughter had liked the children's museum membership the company had given him as part of the employee family program. Liam mentioning that Sophie's latest drawing featured the nice lady boss who helped Daddy. Brief exchanges that lasted maybe 30 seconds but felt significant. Then one Friday, as Liam was packing up to leave at exactly 5 p.m., Ava appeared at his desk with an unusual request. "I have a reservation at Marcello's tonight that I'm not going to use," she said, her tone professionally neutral, but her eyes holding something else. 7 p.m., table for two. It seems wasteful to let it go empty. If you're free and interested in good Italian food, the reservation is under Sinclair. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Liam staring at the sticky note she'd placed on his desk with the restaurant's address. It wasn't a date. She'd been very careful not to call it that. It was a reservation she wasn't using, an invitation extended for purely practical reasons. But Liam's heart was pounding as he texted Mrs. Patterson, asking if she could watch Sophie for a few extra hours. Marcello's was the kind of restaurant where reservations were made months in advance, and the menu didn't list prices. Liam showed up in his work clothes, feeling underdressed the moment he walked through the door. But the hostess led him to a corner table where Ava was already waiting. She'd changed from her work suit into something softer, a dark blue dress that made her look less like a CEO and more like an actual person. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, and without the armor of her professional wardrobe, she looked younger, almost vulnerable. "You came," she said as he sat down, and there was something in her voice that suggested she hadn't been certain he would. "You invited me. Sort of. I offered you a reservation I wasn't using. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ava smiled slightly. "No, not really." The waiter appeared with wine, which Ava had apparently already ordered. They made small talk about nothing important while they looked over menus, both of them dancing around the elephant in the room. That this was the first time they'd been together outside of work, outside of professional context, just two people sharing a meal. It wasn't until after they'd ordered that Ava finally addressed it directly. "I don't do this," she said, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. "Socialize with employees, mix business and personal. I have rules about these things." "I've noticed," Liam said carefully. "But you were right. About the walls. About being afraid." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I've spent 10 years building this company, and I've sacrificed everything personal to do it. Relationships, friendships, anything that might distract from the goal. And somewhere in that process, I forgot how to be anything other than Ava Sinclair, CEO." "Who were you before?" Liam asked quietly. "Ava Sinclair, scholarship kid from nowhere. Ava Sinclair, who put herself through MIT doing every side job she could find. Ava Sinclair, who built her first app in a dorm room because she couldn't afford the software licenses." She took a sip of wine. "Someone hungrier, less polished, more real. I think that person is still in there." "Maybe, but she's buried under a lot of boardroom armor." Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Liam asked the question that had been bothering him since that day in her office. "Why did you help me? Really? You could have just fired me and moved on." Ava was quiet for a long moment. "Because I saw myself in you," she said finally. "Not the circumstances, but the mentality. That belief that if you just work hard enough, push yourself far enough, you can overcome anything. I lived that way for years, still do if I'm honest. And I watched you destroying yourself the same way I almost did, and I thought," she paused, "I thought maybe I could save someone from making my mistakes." "What mistakes?" "Believing that strength means never asking for help. That success requires sacrificing everything else. That letting people see you struggle is weakness." Ava met his eyes. "I'm 30 years old, and the most meaningful relationship in my life is with my company. That's not success, Liam. That's loneliness disguised as achievement." The honesty in her voice made Liam's chest ache. He reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, and rested his hand over hers. "Then maybe it's time to build something different," he said. Ava looked at their hands, hers pale and perfectly manicured, his rougher and marked with the small scars of single parenthood. She didn't pull away. "I don't know how," she admitted. "Neither do I. But we're both good at figuring things out." They stayed at Marcello's until nearly 10, talking about everything except work. Ava told him about growing up in a small town where ambition was viewed with suspicion, about being the first in her family to go to college, about the professor who'd told her she'd never make it in tech because she was too young and too female. Liam told her about Sophie's mother, about the gut-wrenching moment when he'd come home to find her gone with nothing but a note saying she couldn't do it anymore, about learning to braid hair from YouTube videos and figuring out that mac and cheese could be a food group if you added frozen vegetables. They laughed. They shared stories. And for those few hours, they weren't CEO and assistant. They were just two people trying to figure out how to build lives that felt like living instead of just surviving. When the check came, Ava paid before Liam could even reach for his wallet. "This was my invitation," she said firmly. "Next time can be yours." Next time. The words hung in the air between them, full of promise. They left the restaurant together, and Ava's driver was waiting at the curb. She turned to Liam before getting in. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for being honest, for seeing past the Ice Queen." "Thank you for letting me," Liam replied. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the city noise fading into background static. Then Ava did something that shocked them both. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek, soft and brief. "Good night, Liam." "Good night, Ava." He watched her car disappear into traffic, his hand touching the spot on his cheek where her lips had been, and felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerous and exciting and terrifying all at once. This was complicated. This was messy. This was probably a mistake by every professional standard. But as Liam headed home to relieve Mrs. Patterson and check on his sleeping daughter, he couldn't bring himself to regret any of it. The fallout from dinner at Marcello's came on Monday morning in the form of an email from the board's executive committee requesting a meeting with Ava. No explanation, no context, just a time and the expectation that she'd appear. Liam knew something was wrong the moment Ava arrived at the office. Her posture was rigid, her expression harder than usual, and she walked past his desk without even a professional nod. The door to her office closed with enough force to make him wince. He stared at his computer screen, trying to focus on the schedule updates he needed to process. But his mind kept circling back to that kiss on the cheek, the way her lips had felt against his skin, the promise of next time that had hummed between them like electricity. Had someone seen them? Was that what this was about? His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Emergency staff meeting in conference room B, right now. Everyone's required." The conference room was already packed when Liam arrived, the atmosphere thick with tension and barely suppressed gossip. He found a seat near the back, his stomach churning with dread. Jennifer Moss stood at the front of the room, her expression professionally neutral in a way that made Liam's skin crawl. This wasn't going to be good. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Jennifer began. "Jennifer. The board has asked me to address some concerns that have been raised regarding workplace conduct and professional boundaries. Effective immediately, we're implementing a new policy requiring all employees to disclose any personal relationships that could present a conflict of interest. This includes romantic relationships, close friendships, or any arrangement that might compromise professional judgment." The room erupted in murmurs. Liam felt his heart drop into his stomach. "Additionally," Jennifer continued, raising her voice to be heard over the chatter, "any employee who fails to disclose such a relationship will face immediate termination. No exceptions. This policy applies to everyone, from entry-level positions to executive leadership." The message was clear. They were going after Ava, after him, after whatever it was that had started building between them. Marcus caught Liam's eye from across the room, his expression grim. This was targeted. Precise. Someone had seen them at Marcello's or had pieced together enough evidence to force the board's hand. "Are there any questions?" Jennifer asked, scanning the room with an expression that dared anyone to speak up. Silence. Heavy and oppressive. "Good. You'll all receive copies of the new policy by end of day. Please review it carefully and complete the disclosure forms if applicable. That's all. The meeting dispersed slowly, people whispering in clusters as they filed out. Liam stayed in his seat trying to process the implications. He and Ava had one dinner, one conversation outside of work. Was that a relationship that needed disclosure? Or were they still in the gray area of figuring things out? His phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number with a message that made his blood run cold. You should have taken the transfer when you had the chance. Someone was watching. Someone who wanted him gone. Liam made it back to his desk on autopilot, his mind racing through scenarios and outcomes. If he disclosed the dinner, it would confirm the rumors and likely end his job. If he didn't disclose and someone reported them, termination was guaranteed. Either way, he was trapped. Ava's office door remained closed for the rest of the morning. No calls, no meetings, no acknowledgement that anything unusual was happening. But Liam could feel the tension radiating through the walls like heat from a furnace. At noon, his phone rang with an internal extension he didn't recognize. Mr. Carter, this is David Chen from the Executive Committee. Ms. Sinclair has asked that you join her meeting with the board. Conference Room A, immediately. The line went dead before Liam could respond. His hands were shaking as he stood, drawing curious looks from nearby desks. Everyone knew about the board meeting. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. The walk to Conference Room A felt like a death march. Liam's mind spun through possibilities, none of them good. Why would Ava want him in a board meeting? To throw him under the bus? To prove they had nothing to hide? To watch him get fired in real time? The conference room held 6 board members, Jennifer Moss and Ava, who sat at the far end of the table with her spine straight and her expression carved from ice. She didn't look at Liam when he entered, didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Mr. Carter, please sit, David Chen said, gesturing to a chair positioned uncomfortably far from Ava. The distance felt intentional, symbolic. Liam sat, his heart hammering against his ribs. We've asked you here to address some concerns that have been brought to our attention, David continued. Specifically, regarding your relationship with Ms. Sinclair and whether it violates our professional conduct standards. There is no relationship, Liam said, the lie tasting like ash. Ms. Sinclair is my supervisor. I'm her executive assistant. That's the extent of it. Really? Margaret Powell, the board's vice chair, slid a photograph across the table. Because this suggests otherwise. The photo showed Liam and Ava leaving Marcello's together. The image quality wasn't great, taken from across the street, probably with a phone camera, but it was clear enough to identify them, clear enough to see Ava leaning close to him, clear enough to fuel every rumor that had been circulating. Liam stared at the photo, feeling the trap snap shut around them. That was a business dinner, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Ms. Sinclair and I discussed work-related matters at a restaurant. That's not a relationship. That's networking. At 10 o'clock at night? In a romantic restaurant known for intimate dining? Margaret's voice was sharp with skepticism. Mr. Carter, we're not idiots. You were photographed leaving together, and according to our source, you appeared quite comfortable with each other. Your source is stalking employees and taking unauthorized photographs, Ava said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, which I believe violates several privacy laws, not to mention basic professional ethics. We're not here to debate investigative methods, David said. We're here to determine whether you, Ms. Sinclair, have been showing favoritism toward an employee with whom you have a personal relationship. I have not. Then explain the schedule modifications, the child care assistant's enrollment, the refusal to accept his resignation after he fell asleep during a board meeting. Margaret ticked off items on her fingers like she was reading a shopping list. Explain why Mr. Carter receives treatment that no other employee in this company has ever received. Because I'm a good manager who recognized that a valuable employee was burning out and took steps to prevent that, Ava said, her voice dangerously calm. Or would you prefer I let talented people destroy themselves for the sake of optics? We'd prefer you maintain professional boundaries and treat all employees equally. I do treat them equally. I evaluate performance, identify problems, and implement solutions. That's management. If the rest of this company's managers aren't doing the same, that's a different conversation. The room fell silent, tension crackling like static electricity. Liam watched Ava hold her ground against 6 board members who clearly wanted her to admit wrongdoing and felt something fierce bloom in his chest. She was protecting him, again, at her own expense. He couldn't let her do this alone. "We had dinner," Liam said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Ava's expression didn't change, but he saw something flash in her eyes. Warning, maybe, or fear. "One dinner," he continued. "Friday night. Ms. Sinclair invited me to join her at a reservation she wasn't going to use. We talked about work, about life, about nothing particularly important, and then we went our separate ways. That's the entire extent of our personal interaction." "So you admit there is a personal relationship," Margaret said, leaning forward like a shark scenting blood. "I admit we had a conversation outside of work hours. That doesn't make it a relationship. It makes it 2 adults sharing a meal." "A meal where she paid for everything," David added, "according to the restaurant's records." Of course they'd checked. Of course they'd done their homework. This wasn't about protecting company interests. This was about removing Ava from power and using Liam as the weapon to do it. "I offered to pay," Liam said. "She declined. If that's a fireable offense, then every manager who's ever picked up a coffee tab for their team should be terminated." "Don't be obtuse, Mr. Carter. This is about pattern of behavior and abuse of authority." "No," Ava said, her voice low and controlled but vibrating with barely suppressed anger. "This is about the fact that 6 months ago, 3 of you tried to force me out during the acquisition talks and failed. This is revenge disguised as ethics, and you're using my assistant as collateral damage." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. David's expression tightened, and Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's a serious allegation, Ms. Sinclair," David said. "So is stalking employees and manufacturing scandals to justify executive termination." Ava stood, her posture radiating controlled fury. "I've built this company from nothing. I've generated more revenue in 5 years than most companies see in 20. And you're willing to destroy that because you don't like that I won't be your puppet. We're willing to protect this company from leadership that prioritizes personal relationships over professional judgment," Margaret countered. "And if you can't separate the two, perhaps you're not fit for this position." The room went deathly quiet. It was the nuclear option, the threat they'd been building toward. Step down or be forced out. Liam watched Ava's face, saw the moment she understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. He was just the excuse they needed to remove her from power. "I'm resigning," Liam said, the words leaving his mouth before his brain caught up. "Effective immediately." "Liam, no!" Ava's mask cracked, genuine panic flashing across her face. "I appreciate the opportunity to work at Sinclair Technologies," Liam continued, talking over her objection. "But clearly my presence has become a distraction. I'll submit formal paperwork by end of day." He stood, not looking at Ava because if he looked at her, he might lose his nerve. "Mr. Carter, that's not necessary," David started. "It is, actually. You've made it clear that my employment here is creating problems for Miss Sinclair. I won't be responsible for damaging her reputation or this company, so I'm removing myself from the equation." "Sit down," Ava said, her voice sharp with command. "You are not resigning." "With respect, Ms. Sinclair, that's not your decision to make." Liam finally met her eyes, trying to communicate everything he couldn't say out loud. "I'm protecting you. Let me protect you. I'll clear out my desk this afternoon." He walked out of the conference room before anyone could stop him, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Behind him, he heard Ava's voice rise in protest, heard the board members trying to restore order, but he didn't stop walking. Marcus intercepted him at his desk. "What the hell just happened?" Marcus demanded. "You were in there for 20 minutes and you come out looking like you're heading for the gallows." "I quit." "You what?" "I resigned, or I'm about to. I need to write the letter." Liam's hands were shaking as he pulled up a blank document. "They were going after Ava, using me as ammunition, so I'm removing the ammunition." "Liam, you can't just throw away your job. Watch me." He typed the resignation letter in a fury, his fingers hammering the keys with more force than necessary. Standard professional language about pursuing other opportunities and thanking them for the experience. Nothing about board politics or manufactured scandals or the fact that he was sacrificing his career to protect someone who'd shown him more kindness in 2 weeks than most people showed in years. He printed the letter, signed it, and walked to HR before he could second-guess himself. Jennifer Moss looked almost sympathetic when he handed her the resignation. "Mr. Carter, you don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yeah, I really do. The board was willing to let you transfer. The board was willing to use me as a weapon against Ava Sinclair. I won't be part of that." Jennifer sighed, accepting the letter with visible reluctance. "This will be effective in 2 weeks per company policy. You'll need to make it effective today. I'll forfeit the 2 weeks' notice. I just need to clear my desk and go." "Liam, please." His voice cracked slightly. "Just let me do this with whatever dignity I have left." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll process it for immediate termination. You'll receive your final paycheck plus any accrued PTO within the week." "Thank you." Liam made it back to his desk and started packing his few personal items into a box. Photos of Sophie, the coffee mug she'd decorated for him last Father's Day, a few files he'd need to transition to whoever replaced him. It wasn't much. 3 years condensed into one cardboard box. The office had gone silent around him, everyone watching the spectacle of Liam Carter packing up and leaving. He could feel their eyes, hear their whispered speculation. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked vindicated, like they'd been proven right about the scandal. He was almost finished when Ava's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Carter, my office. Now." He looked up to find her standing in her doorway, her expression absolutely murderous. Not at him, he realized. For him. "Ms. Sinclair, I've resigned. I'm no longer— I don't care, get in here." The authority in her voice was absolute. Liam set down the box and followed her into the office, acutely aware of every eye tracking their movement. Ava closed the door behind them with enough force to rattle the frame. "What the hell were you thinking?" she demanded, rounding on him with fury blazing in her eyes. "I was thinking that I wasn't going to let them use me to destroy you. That's not your decision to make." "Actually, it is. It's my career, my choice, and I chose not to be their weapon." Ava stared at him, her chest rising and falling with barely controlled emotion. "You just threw away a job you needed, that your daughter needed. For what? To protect me?" "Yes. I didn't ask you to do that." "You didn't have to ask." Liam took a step closer, his own anger rising to match hers. "You helped me when I was drowning. You saw me as a person instead of just an employee. You showed me that asking for help wasn't weakness. Did you really think I was going to stand there and watch them tear you apart?" "I can handle the board." "Not when they're using me as ammunition. You can't." They had photos, Ava. They tracked down restaurant receipts. They were building a case, and I was the evidence, so I removed myself from the equation. By destroying your own stability. By protecting someone who matters to me. The words came out louder than intended, echoing in the office. "You matter, Ava. What we started to build matters. And I wasn't going to let corporate politics destroy that before we even figured out what it was." Ava went very still, her anger shifting into something else, something that looked almost like fear. "You can't do this," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You can't sacrifice yourself for me. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work? You get to help me, but I don't get to help you? You get to care, but I have to stay professional and distant?" Liam closed the remaining distance between them. "That's not a relationship, Ava. That's you staying safe behind your walls while everyone else takes the hits." "I never asked you to care about me." "Too late. I already do." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Ava's carefully constructed mask crumbled completely, leaving behind someone scared and uncertain and entirely human. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let someone care without it destroying everything." "Then we'll figure it out together, but not if you keep pushing me away every time things get hard." "Liam, you just quit your job. That's not figuring it out. That's throwing a grenade into both our lives." "Maybe, but it's also the only move that protects you from the board. As long as I work here, they can use our connection against you. If I'm gone, there's no scandal, no ammunition, just a CEO who tried to help an employee and got burned for it." Ava's eyes were shining with unshed tears, and seeing her this close to breaking undid something in Liam's chest. "You're an idiot," she said, but there was no heat in it. "Probably. A noble, self-sacrificing idiot who just made my life infinitely more complicated. Sorry about that." "No, you're not." "No, I'm not." Ava laughed, a sound caught between humor and despair. Then, before Liam could process what was happening, she closed the final distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't like the gentle kiss on the cheek outside Marcello's. This was desperate and honest and full of everything they'd been holding back. Liam's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and Ava's fingers tangled in his hair like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ava pressed her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she murmured. "The worst," Liam agreed. "You don't even have a job anymore." "I'll find something." "The board is going to lose their minds. Let them." Ava pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "I'm serious, Liam. If we do this, if we actually try this, it's going to be messy and complicated, and there's a good chance it ends badly. Or there's a chance it ends well. Either way, I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Something shifted in Ava's expression, fear giving way to something that looked almost like hope. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, we'll try, but Liam, I need you to understand something." Her voice was serious, almost grave. "I'm terrible at relationships. I'm controlling and I work too much and I have no idea how to balance personal and professional. You're probably going to regret this. Let me worry about my own regrets. And Sophie gets to meet you when and if we decide the time is right. Not before. I won't bring her into something uncertain." Ava nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Thank you." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in her office, while the entire floor probably speculated about what was happening behind the closed door. Finally, Ava stepped back, her professional mask sliding into place like armor. "You still need to finish packing your desk," she said. "I know. And I need to go back to the board and deal with the fallout. I know that too. But tonight," she paused, "tonight, if you're free, we should talk. Actually talk. About what this means and where we go from here." "I'm free," Liam said. "Sophie has a play date until 7. I can meet you after. My place. I'll text you the address." Ava moved toward her desk, already shifting back into CEO mode. "And Liam?" He paused at the door. "Thank you for protecting me, even though you're an idiot for doing it. Anytime." He left her office and returned to his desk, where the cardboard box waited like a rebuke. Marcus appeared immediately. "So you really did it," Marcus said. "Yeah. And you kissed your boss." Liam froze. "How did you—" "Everyone can see into her office when the blinds are open. Genius." "Which they were. So congratulations, you just confirmed every rumor that's been floating around this building." Liam looked at Ava's office and realized Marcus was right. The blinds were wide open. Half the floor had probably watched them kiss. "Well," Liam said, feeling strangely calm about the disaster he'd just created, "at least now they have actual evidence instead of speculation." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "You're either the bravest person I know or the stupidest. I haven't decided which." "Can it be both?" "Yeah, probably." Marcus helped him finish packing. "What are you going to do now? For work, I mean." Liam had no idea. He'd been so focused on protecting Ava that he hadn't thought about the practical implications. He had maybe 3 months of savings if he was careful. After that, he'd be back where he started, drowning in bills with no income and a daughter who depended on him. But somehow, even facing that terrifying reality, he couldn't regret his choice. "I'll figure something out," he said, more confidently than he felt. "Well, when you do, call me. I might know some people who are hiring." "Thanks, Marcus." "Yeah, well, someone's got to look out for the noble idiots of the world." Liam finished packing, said goodbye to the few co-workers who seemed genuinely sad to see him go, and walked out of Sinclair Technologies for the last time as an employee. The elevator ride down felt surreal, like he was leaving one life behind and stepping into another without a map or guidebook. His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Are you okay?" He typed back, "Yeah, terrified, but okay." "Me too. See you tonight." Liam stepped out onto the street, cardboard box in hand, unemployed and uncertain and somehow lighter than he'd felt in years. He'd made his choice. Now came the hard part, living with the consequences and hoping that what he'd found with Ava was worth the risk. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "This is Rebecca Shaw from Titan Industries. I heard you might be looking for new opportunities. Would you be interested in discussing a position? Executive assistant to our COO. Better hours than your last job and comparable salary." Liam stopped walking, his brain struggling to process. "How did you—" Word travels fast in our industry, especially when someone with your reputation becomes available. "Are you interested?" He thought about Ava's words, about figuring things out, about building something new instead of clinging to what was familiar. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Take the week. My contact information is in the email I just sent. Looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. Carter." The call ended, and Liam stood on the sidewalk staring at his phone. One door closed and another opened immediately. Maybe the universe was on his side after all. Or maybe, for the first time in years, he'd made a choice based on what mattered instead of what was safe. And that made all the difference. He had 7 hours until he needed to pick up Sophie. 7 hours to process what he'd done and prepare for whatever came next. 7 hours until he showed up at Ava Sinclair's apartment and they figured out if what they'd started was real or just two lonely people reaching for connection in the chaos. Either way, Liam was done playing it safe. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Ava's apartment was nothing like Liam expected. He'd imagined something cold and minimalist, all glass and steel reflecting the Ice Queen persona she showed the world. Instead, he walked into a space that felt almost warm. Exposed brick walls, bookshelves crammed with novels and tech manuals. A worn leather couch that looked actually comfortable instead of decorative. There was a half-finished mug of tea on the coffee table and a blanket draped over the armrest like someone had been curled up there recently. It was the home of a person, not a CEO. And that somehow made everything feel more real. Ava stood in the kitchen area, pouring wine with hands that weren't quite steady. She'd changed from her work clothes into jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without the armor of her professional wardrobe, she looked younger, vulnerable. "This is weird, right?" she said without looking at him. "You being here, us doing this." "Incredibly weird," Liam agreed, accepting the wine glass she offered. "Also kind of terrifying. At least we're on the same page." Ava moved to the couch, curling into the corner with her legs tucked under her. The gesture was so casual, so unlike the rigid posture she maintained at work, that Liam felt something in his chest loosen. He sat at the other end of the couch, leaving space between them. They needed to talk before anything else happened. Needed to figure out what this actually was beyond desperation and attraction and two lonely people reaching for connection. "The board called an emergency session after you left," Ava said quietly. "They wanted me to condemn your behavior, to make a public statement about maintaining professional boundaries and ensuring it never happens again." "What did you tell them?" "I told them that my personal life is none of their business as long as it doesn't impact my ability to run this company, and that if they wanted to remove me over a single dinner and a kiss, they should be prepared for the legal battle that would follow." She took a long sip of wine. "They backed down. For now. They're going to keep coming after you. Probably. 3 of them want me gone. The other 3 are on the fence. It's going to be a fight." Ava looked at him directly. "Are you sure you want to be part of that fight? Because once we do this publicly, once people know we're together, it's going to get ugly." "I quit my job for you today," Liam pointed out. "I think I've already chosen my side." "You quit because the board forced your hand. That's different than choosing to stay when things get messy." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, I made a choice, and I'd make it again." Ava studied him for a long moment, something complicated moving across her face. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "You barely know me. You've worked for me for 3 years, but we've had maybe 5 actual conversations that went beyond schedules and meetings. Why would you risk everything for someone you don't even know?" It was a fair question, one Liam had been asking himself since he walked out of that board meeting. He set down his wine glass and tried to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. "You're right that I don't know everything about you," he said slowly. "I don't know your favorite color or what you do on Sundays or whether you're a morning person. But I know the things that matter. I know you saved a 4-year-old's crayon drawing like it was precious. I know you restructured my entire job to keep me from burning out when you could have just replaced me. I know you stood up to the board today, even though it would have been easier to throw me under the bus." He leaned forward, needing her to understand. "I know that underneath the Ice Queen exterior is someone who cares so much that she has to pretend not to care at all. Someone who built walls to protect herself and forgot that walls keep people out and in. Someone who's been alone for so long that she's forgotten what it feels like to have someone in her corner." Ava's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You see too much. Or you hide too much. Both, probably." She set down her own wine glass, her hands twisting together in her lap. "Liam, I need to tell you something. About why I am the way I am. About why this is so hard for me." Liam waited, giving her space to find the words. "When I was building this company," Ava began, her voice quiet but steady, "I had a partner. Not romantic, just business. His name was Jason, and we were going to change the world together. We built the first version of our platform in his apartment, survived on ramen and terrible coffee, believed we could actually make it work." She paused, her gaze distant with memory. "We got our first major investor meeting when I was 24. I was so excited I could barely sleep. But the morning of the meeting, Jason called to say he couldn't make it. Family emergency. So I went alone. And I crushed it. They loved the pitch, loved the technology, wanted to invest $2 million. "That's incredible," Liam said. "It would have been. Except when I got back to tell Jason, I found him meeting with those same investors, without me. He told them I was just the technical support, that he was the visionary, the real founder, and he wanted to cut me out of the deal entirely." Ava's voice was flat, emotionless, but Liam could hear the pain underneath. "The investors believed him. They offered him the money and told me I could stay on as a developer, but I'd have no equity, no control, no ownership of the company I'd built." "What did you do?" "I walked away, took our code, our patents, everything that was legally mine, and started over. Built Sinclair Technologies from scratch without him, and I promised myself I would never, ever let anyone have that kind of power over me again." She finally looked at Liam. "So I built walls. I made myself cold and untouchable. I became someone who didn't need anyone, who couldn't be betrayed because I never let anyone close enough to matter. And it worked. I built an empire. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else." Liam felt the weight of that confession settle over him. "I'm not Jason. I know that. Logically, I know that. But there's a part of me that's terrified you'll do the same thing, that I'll let you in and you'll use it against me, that caring about you will make me weak." "But caring about someone doesn't make you weak, Ava. It makes you human. In my world, human gets you destroyed." "Then maybe your world needs to change," Ava laughed, a sound caught between humor and despair. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. Nothing about this is simple. But it's not impossible either." Liam shifted closer, bridging some of the distance between them. "Look, I'm not asking you to tear down all your walls overnight. I'm not expecting you to suddenly become someone you're not. I'm just asking you to let me try, to give us a chance to figure out what this could be. And if I can't, if I'm too broken to do this right, then we'll be broken together, because I'm not exactly coming to this undamaged either." Liam thought about his ex-wife walking out, about the 2 years of struggling alone, about falling asleep during a meeting because he'd pushed himself past human limits. "I've got my own walls, my own fears, my own history of people leaving when things get hard. So maybe we're both a mess, but at least we can be honest about it." Ava reached out tentatively, her fingers finding his. The touch was light, uncertain, but it felt like progress. "I'm going to disappoint you," she whispered. "I'm going to work too much and forget to text back and probably screw this up in a dozen different ways. And I'm going to be broke for a while and have a 4-year-old who needs attention and probably drive you crazy with my need to fix everything. We're both going to mess up. That's how relationships work." "I wouldn't know. I've never actually had one. Not a real one. The admission was so raw, so vulnerable, that Liam felt something crack in his chest. 30 years old, and she'd never let anyone close enough to try. Then we'll figure it out together, he said. No expectations, no pressure, just two people trying to build something real. Ava pulled him closer, closing the remaining distance between them until their foreheads touched. I'm scared, she admitted. Of this, of us, of what it means. Me too. But you're still here. Yeah, I'm still here. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together, letting the reality of what they were choosing settle over them. Then Ava kissed him, soft and slow, and full of promise. Not desperate like earlier in her office, but deliberate, a choice made with open eyes. When they pulled apart, Ava's expression had shifted to something almost playful. So what's the plan? She asked. You're unemployed, I'm under investigation by my own board, and we just confirmed every rumor that's been circulating. How do we make this work? Well, I got a job offer today, executive assistant position at Titan Industries, better hours, comparable pay. Ava's eyebrows rose. Rebecca Shaw called you? You know her? She's been trying to poach my best people for years. Usually, I'd be furious. Ava smiled slightly. But in this case, it might actually solve our biggest problem. If you're working for a different company, the board can't claim conflict of interest. That was my thinking too. Plus, the 8-hour days mean I can actually be present for Sophie. No more drowning in work. Speaking of Sophie, Ava said carefully, when do I get to meet her? The question made Liam's heart skip. You want to meet her? I want to know the people who matter to you, and she clearly matters most. She does. But Ava, I need you to understand something. Liam took a breath, choosing his words carefully. Sophie's been through a lot. Her mother left without explanation. She spent 2 years watching me struggle and pretend everything was fine. I won't bring someone into her life unless I'm sure they're going to stay. So we need to be solid before that happens. Really solid. Not just figuring it out, but committed. That's fair, Ava said quietly. And honestly, that terrifies me almost as much as the relationship itself. I've never been around kids. I have no idea how to talk to a 4-year-old. Sophie's pretty forgiving, and she already thinks you're the nice lady boss who helped Daddy. You've got a head start. The nice lady boss, Ava repeated with a slight smile. If only the board could hear that character reference. They talked for hours after that, the conversation flowing easier than Liam expected. Ava told him about growing up in a town so small it didn't have a stoplight, about her mother who'd worked 3 jobs to support her education, about the scholarship to MIT that changed everything. Liam shared stories about Sophie's first steps, about learning to parent alone, about the guilt that came with every choice between career and fatherhood. It was past midnight when Liam finally checked his phone and realized how late it had gotten. I should go, he said reluctantly. Mrs. Patterson is watching Sophie, and I don't want to take advantage. Okay. Ava walked him to the door, and Liam could see the vulnerability in her expression. The fear that this was just one night, that morning would bring doubt and distance. He kissed her at the doorway, putting everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When he pulled back, he rested his hand against her cheek. I'm not going anywhere, he said. This is real. We're real. Okay? Okay, Ava whispered. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure out the next steps. The board is going to push for answers. Then we'll give them answers, together. Liam left her apartment feeling lighter than he had in years, despite the uncertainty of his employment status and the mess they'd created. He'd made his choice. They both had. Now came the work of building something that could survive scrutiny and doubt and all the forces that wanted to tear them apart. The next morning, Liam woke to 3 missed calls from Marcus and a text that just said, "Turn on the news." His stomach dropped as he grabbed his laptop and pulled up the local business network. The headline made his blood run cold. Sinclair Technologies CEO under fire. Board alleges inappropriate relationship with former employee. The story had leaked. Someone had given the press everything, the photos from Marcello's, the kiss in Ava's office, even details about the board meeting. They'd spun it into a scandal about abuse of power and conflicts of interest, painting Ava as a CEO who'd let personal desires compromise professional judgment. Liam's phone rang. Ava, have you seen it? She asked without preamble. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Ava. This is my fault. It's not your fault. It's the board playing dirty. They leaked this to force my hand. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. They're calling an emergency shareholder meeting tomorrow. They're going to try to remove me. What can I do? Nothing. This is corporate warfare and you're a civilian. I need to handle this myself. No! Liam's voice was firm. We're in this together, remember? You don't get to shut me out the moment things get hard. Ava was silent for a long moment. Liam, if you stand with me publicly, it confirms everything they're saying. It damages you, too. I don't care. I'm not hiding anymore. You should care. You have Sophie to think about. What happens when this hits social media? When parents at her daycare see you all over the news? The thought made Liam's stomach twist, but he didn't back down. Then I'll deal with it, but I'm not abandoning you. You're impossible, Ava said, but there was something like gratitude in her voice. So I've been told. What do you need from me? Just be ready. This is going to get worse before it gets better. She was right. By noon, the story had exploded across business media and social platforms. The photos of them leaving Marcello's were everywhere, analyzed and dissected by people who'd never met them but had strong opinions about CEO ethics and workplace relationships. The comments ranged from supportive to vicious, with most landing somewhere in the middle of judgmental. Liam tried to shield Sophie from it, but Mrs. Patterson called that afternoon with a gentle warning that some of the other parents had been asking questions. Nothing aggressive, just curiosity about whether Sophie's dad was the same Liam Carter from the news. I'm sorry, Liam said, his heart sinking. I never meant for this to affect her. It's okay, dear. These things blow over. But you might want to prepare for some attention when you pick her up today. The attention came in the form of stares and whispered conversations as Liam walked into the daycare. Most parents looked away when he met their eyes, but a few held his gaze with expressions ranging from sympathy to disapproval. He collected Sophie quickly, grateful that she was too focused on telling him about her day to notice the atmosphere. Daddy, we made butterflies today. Mine has purple wings because purple is the best color. Do you want to see it? I'd love to see it, sweetheart. Liam buckled her into her car seat, his hands shaking slightly with the effort of appearing normal. You look sad, Sophie observed with the blunt honesty of children. Are you sad? Just tired, baby. Work stuff. Is the nice lady boss still helping you? The question hit harder than it should. Yeah, she is. We're helping each other, actually. That's good. Helping is important. Sophie went back to chattering about butterflies, oblivious to the storm her father was navigating. That night after Sophie was asleep, Liam's phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Carter, this is Eleanor Vance from the Sinclair Technologies Board. I apologize for calling so late, but I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's meeting. Liam's guard went up immediately. What can I do for you, Ms. Vance? I want to know the truth. Not the version the media is spinning, not what the board wants me to believe. Just the truth about your relationship with Ava Sinclair. Why should I tell you anything? Because I'm one of 3 votes that could save her position, and I need to know if she's worth saving. The bluntness was almost refreshing. Liam took a breath, considering his words carefully. The truth is that Ava Sinclair is the best manager I've ever worked for. She's demanding and expects excellence, but she also sees her employees as people. When I was burning out, she didn't fire me. She helped me find resources and adjusted my schedule so I could actually have a life outside of work. That's not abuse of power. That's good leadership. And the personal relationship? Started after she helped me. We had dinner once while I was still employed. One dinner where we talked about our lives and discovered we actually liked each other. That's it. When the board tried to use that against her, I resigned to protect her reputation. Everything else happened after I was no longer her employee. So you fell for her, Eleanor said. Yeah, I fell for her. The person she is underneath the CEO mask. Someone who's lonely and brilliant and scared of letting people in because she's been hurt before. Someone who deserves to have people in her corner instead of constantly fighting alone. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. You love her. The statement caught Liam off guard because he hadn't quite put those words to what he felt. But hearing Eleanor say it, he realized it was true. Somewhere between falling asleep on her shoulder and watching her fight the board for him, he'd fallen in love with Ava Sinclair. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." "Then I suggest you show up tomorrow. The meeting is at 2 p.m. in the main boardroom. If Ava Sinclair is going to survive this, she's going to need all the allies she can get." The call ended before Liam could ask what that meant. He sat in his darkening living room, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. Eleanor wanted him at the meeting. Why? To testify, to provide evidence, or to show the board that whatever was happening between him and Ava was real and worth protecting? He texted Ava, "Eleanor Vance just called me. She wants me at the meeting tomorrow." The response came almost immediately. "Don't. This is my fight." "Eleanor said you need allies. Let me be one. Liam, if you show up, it confirms everything they're saying about us." "Good. Because they're right. We are together, and I'm not hiding from that." A long pause. Then, "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Okay. But Liam, be ready for them to come after you too. They're not going to make this easy. I know. We'll handle it. Together." He spent the rest of the evening researching shareholder meeting protocols and corporate governance rules, trying to prepare for a battle he didn't fully understand. Marcus called around 10 with advice that was both practical and pessimistic. "You know they're going to destroy you, right?" Marcus said bluntly. "The board has lawyers and PR teams and unlimited resources. You're just one guy defending a relationship that started under questionable circumstances." "It didn't start under questionable circumstances. We had dinner. After she gave you special treatment that no other employee received. They're going to twist that into something ugly. Let them try. I'm done caring what they think." Marcus sighed. "You really love her, don't you?" "Yeah, I really do." "Then I hope she's worth it, because you're about to stake everything on this fight." "She's worth it. And Marcus, thanks for looking out for me." "Someone has to. Call me after the meeting. I want to know you survived." Liam hung up and checked on Sophie one more time, watching her sleep with her favorite stuffed bear clutched against her chest. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. He was doing this for her too, fighting for something real instead of just surviving, building a life instead of enduring one. Whatever happened tomorrow, he'd made his choice. Now he just had to live with the consequences. The morning of the meeting arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Liam dropped Sophie at daycare, ignoring the stares and whispers, and headed downtown to Meridian Tower. Walking into that building felt surreal. He'd been here just days ago as an employee, and now he was returning as what? A witness? A defendant? The partner of the woman they were trying to destroy. Security recognized him but didn't stop him. The elevator ride to the 62nd floor felt eternal. When the doors opened, he found Marcus waiting in the lobby. "You actually came," Marcus said. "I told Ava I would." "She's already in there. Has been since 7 this morning, preparing with her lawyers." Marcus lowered his voice. "Liam, the board has ammunition, documents showing every favor she did for you, testimony from employees claiming bias, even financial records showing the childcare assistance money. They're building a case that she showed you preferential treatment because you were involved." "We weren't involved then. The relationship started after all of that." "Can you prove it?" The question hit like cold water. Could he? Or would it always be his word against their evidence? "I can tell the truth," Liam said. "That's all I've got." "Then make it count." The boardroom was packed when Liam entered. All 9 board members sat along one side of the massive table, their lawyers arranged behind them like an army. Ava sat alone on the opposite side with just 2 attorneys flanking her, and the asymmetry of the setup was clearly intentional. They wanted her to look isolated, outnumbered. But when Ava's eyes met Liam's across the room, something in her expression shifted. She wasn't alone anymore. David Chen called the meeting to order, his voice professionally neutral but his eyes hard. "This emergency session has been called to address serious allegations of misconduct by CEO Ava Sinclair," he began. "Specifically, allegations that Ms. Sinclair engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee and used her position to grant that employee preferential treatment, creating a hostile work environment and exposing this company to legal liability." The formal language made it sound so clinical, so detached from the reality of what had actually happened. Ms. Sinclair, you have the opportunity to respond to these allegations before we proceed to testimony, David continued. Ava stood, her posture straight and her voice clear. I acknowledge that I developed a personal relationship with Liam Carter. However, that relationship began after he was no longer my employee and does not constitute misconduct. As for the accusations of preferential treatment, I provided Mr. Carter with access to employee resources he was entitled to but hadn't utilized. I adjusted his schedule to prevent burnout, which is standard management practice. Every action I took was within my authority as CEO and in the best interest of retaining a valuable employee. And the dinner at Marcello's? Margaret Powell asked. That occurred while he was still employed. That was one dinner where we discussed professional transitions and personal challenges. Nothing inappropriate occurred. Witnesses say otherwise. Margaret slid a folder across the table. We have a sworn statement from the restaurant staff describing the interaction as intimate and romantic. Ava's lawyer interjected. A statement from staff who were likely paid for their testimony. This is character assassination, not evidence. The meeting devolved into legal arguments and procedural debates that made Liam's head spin. He watched Ava hold her ground against 9 people determined to tear her down and felt fury build in his chest. This wasn't about ethics or company interests. This was revenge for her refusing to be controlled. Finally, David turned his attention to Liam. Mr. Carter, you're here as a witness. We'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Ms. Sinclair. Liam stood, his heart pounding. I'll answer whatever you want to know. When did your romantic relationship with Ms. Sinclair begin? After I resigned. We had one dinner while I was still employed, but that was professional conversation. The relationship didn't start until I was no longer working here. But Ms. Sinclair had already been showing you favoritism for weeks before that dinner. She was being a good manager. There's a difference. A good manager who singled you out for special treatment? Who personally enrolled you in programs instead of having HR handle it? Who protected you from consequences after you disrupted a board meeting? Margaret's voice dripped with skepticism. That's not management, Mr. Carter. That's preferential treatment born from personal interest. Or it's someone who recognized that demanding excellence from employees requires providing them with support. Liam's voice was steady, despite his racing heart. Ava Sinclair didn't give me special treatment. She gave me the resources I needed to do my job without destroying myself. If that's considered favoritism in this company, then your problem is much bigger than one relationship. The room went silent. Several board members looked uncomfortable. The fact remains, David said carefully, that Ms. Sinclair's actions created the appearance of impropriety, and in corporate governance, appearance matters as much as reality. Then maybe corporate governance needs to change, Liam said. Because from where I'm sitting, you're punishing someone for caring about their employees, for seeing them as human beings instead of resources. Ava Sinclair built this company from nothing. She's generated billions in revenue. And you're willing to throw that away because she had dinner with someone she cared about. We're protecting the company from liability. You're protecting your own power because Ava Sinclair doesn't answer to you the way you want her to. She makes her own decisions, runs this company her way, and that terrifies you, so you're using me as an excuse to remove her. The accusation hung in the air, bold and reckless. Liam knew he just made himself an enemy of 9 powerful people, but he didn't care anymore. Is that all true? Eleanor Vance spoke for the first time, her gaze fixed on Ava. You care about him? Ava stood slowly, her mask falling away to reveal something raw underneath. Yes, she said simply. I care about him. I care about his daughter. I care that he was working himself into collapse and nobody noticed except me. And yes, that caring evolved into something personal. But I will not apologize for seeing my employees as people. I will not apologize for helping someone who needed it. And I will not apologize for falling for someone who sees past the CEO and values the person underneath. The vulnerability in her voice was shocking. Liam had never heard Ava speak like this publicly, never seen her let the mask slip this completely. So you admit the relationship affected your professional judgment, David said. No. I admit that my professional judgment includes recognizing when people need support. If you're asking me to choose between being a good CEO and being a good human being, I choose both. And if this board can't accept that, then maybe I'm not the right person to lead this company. The silence that followed was absolute. Ava had just offered them what they wanted, her resignation disguised as a principle. But before anyone could respond, Eleanor spoke again. I have a question for Mr. Carter. All eyes turned to Liam. Do you love her? Eleanor asked bluntly. The question was invasive and inappropriate and completely beside the point of corporate governance. But Liam answered anyway. Yes, I love her. And your daughter? How does she factor into this? She doesn't know yet. Ava and I agreed that we wouldn't involve Sophie until we were certain this was real and lasting. We're protecting her. So you're serious about this relationship. It's not just... Eleanor paused, searching for words. A workplace fling that got out of hand. It's not a fling. It's two people who found each other in the chaos and decided to build something real. And yeah, the circumstances were complicated, but that doesn't make it less valid. Eleanor looked at the other board members. I've heard enough. I call for a vote. We haven't finished the testimony, David protested. We don't need more testimony. We need to decide if we're the kind of company that punishes good leadership because it doesn't conform to outdated standards of emotional detachment. I vote to retain Ms. Sinclair as CEO. 1 vote. They needed 5 to save Ava's position. The silence stretched as board members looked at each other, calculating political costs and alliances. Finally, another hand rose, then another. When the count finished, it was 5-4. Ava kept her position by a single vote. The boardroom erupted in protests and legal arguments, but Liam only watched Ava. She stood very still, her expression carefully controlled, but he could see the relief in her eyes. She'd survived. They'd survived. David called for order. This matter is resolved for now, but Ms. Sinclair, understand that you're under scrutiny. Any hint of impropriety going forward will result in immediate review. Understood, Ava said quietly. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Lawyers gathered their papers, board members argued in clusters, and Liam made his way to Ava through the crowd. When he reached her, she looked up at him with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. You came, she whispered. I told you I would. You told them you loved me. In front of everyone. Yeah, because it's true. Ava's composure cracked completely. She stepped into his arms and held on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Liam didn't care that half the board was watching, didn't care that this moment would probably be dissected and analyzed. He just held her and let her shake with relief and terror and exhaustion. We did it, she murmured against his chest. We actually did it. You did it. I just showed up. No, you fought for me. Nobody's ever done that before. Liam pulled back enough to look at her face. Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere. She kissed him then, right there in the boardroom, in front of the lawyers and board members and everyone who'd tried to tear them apart. It was a declaration and a promise and a refusal to hide anymore. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor Vance was standing nearby with an expression that might have been approval. You two are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, she said. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? Liam asked, echoing what he'd told Marcus days ago. Eleanor smiled slightly. Probably. Miss Sinclair, a word of advice? Take a vacation. Give the dust time to settle. Show the board that you can maintain professional boundaries even with Mr. Carter in your life. I have the European expansion launch in 2 weeks. Delegate it. That's what you have a senior team for. Show them you trust your people. Eleanor turned to Liam. And you, Mr. Carter, take that job at Titan Industries. Build your own career independent of Miss Sinclair. Prove that this relationship isn't about power or advancement. I was planning to, Liam said. Good. You're both going to need to work twice as hard to overcome the stigma of how this started. But if you're serious about making it work, you'll figure it out. Eleanor walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of the meeting. Ava looked at Liam with an expression somewhere between exhaustion and amazement. We survived, she said. We did more than survive. We chose each other publicly, with everyone watching. That's not survival, that's living. Ava's smile was small but genuine. I like the sound of that. Living instead of just surviving. Then let's keep doing it. Take Eleanor's advice. Take a vacation, delegate the expansion, and let's actually figure out what this relationship looks like without corporate drama hanging over our heads. And Sophie? The question made Liam's heart skip. When we come back, when things are settled and we're sure, then you can meet her. I'm nervous, Ava admitted. What if she doesn't like me? She will, but Ava, she's going to see through any mask you wear. 4-year-olds have zero filter, so you'll have to be real with her. I can do real, I think. With you, I can. They left Meridian Tower together, walking out into afternoon sunlight that felt like vindication. The press was waiting, cameras flashing, questions shouted from every direction. But Liam just took Ava's hand and kept walking, refusing to engage with the spectacle. They'd made their choice, weathered the storm, and somehow, impossibly, they'd come out the other side still standing. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. No more hiding, no more walls, no more pretending that what they'd found was anything less than real. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was theirs. And that was enough. 3 weeks later, Liam stood in the kitchen of his apartment making breakfast while Sophie sat at the table coloring another picture. The morning felt almost surreally normal after the chaos of the board meeting and the media frenzy that had followed. He'd started at Titan Industries the previous Monday, and the change had been shocking in its simplicity. 8-hour days, reasonable expectations. A boss who didn't expect him to sacrifice his entire life for quarterly earnings. Rebecca Shaw had been direct during his first day. I hired you because you're good at what you do, not because of the drama at Sinclair. Leave that baggage at the door. Here, you're just another employee who happens to be excellent at his job. The boundary had been refreshing. No whispers, no sideways glances, just work. Liam had forgotten what it felt like to be evaluated purely on performance instead of who he was dating. Ava had taken Eleanor's advice and delegated the European expansion to her senior team, then disappeared to a cabin upstate for 10 days with strict instructions to her office that she was unavailable except for genuine emergencies. The silence had been hard at first. They'd been texting constantly since the board meeting, finding their rhythm in digital conversations. But Liam understood she needed space to process everything that had happened. She'd returned yesterday, and they'd had dinner at her apartment. Just the two of them, take-out Thai food, and hours of conversation that felt easier than it should have. The board was still watching, she'd told him, but the immediate threat had passed. 3 of the members who'd voted against her had quietly resigned under pressure from major shareholders, who weren't pleased about the attempted coup. The remaining board was wary, but functional. We're on probation, Ava had said with a slight smile. Both of us. They're waiting for us to fail. Then we won't give them the satisfaction. Now, watching Sophie hum to herself while she drew, Liam felt the weight of the decision ahead. They'd agreed to wait until things settled before introducing Sophie to Ava, but settled was a relative term. Was 3 weeks enough? A month? How did you know when it was safe to bring a 4-year-old into something that still felt fragile and new? His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. How's your morning? Good. Making pancakes. Sophie's drawing you another picture. She doesn't even know me, and she's drawing me pictures? I might have mentioned that the nice lady boss would like to see her artwork. Liam Carter, are you preparing your daughter to meet me? He smiled at the phone. Maybe. Is that okay? A long pause, then, it's terrifying. But okay. When? That was the question. Liam looked at Sophie, who'd abandoned her picture in favor of building a tower with her cereal pieces, and felt his chest tighten with protective fear. Ava was right to be nervous. This was huge. This was introducing the person he loved to the person who mattered most in the world. This weekend? Low pressure. Maybe the park and ice cream? If it goes well, we can do more. If not, we have an exit strategy. You've really thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for 3 weeks. Me neither. Okay. Saturday. The park. I'll try not to have a panic attack. You're going to be great. She already likes you. She doesn't know me well enough to like me. She knows you helped her dad when he needed it. That's enough for her. The rest you'll figure out together. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, the kind of crisp blue sky day that felt designed for parks and new beginnings. Liam had explained to Sophie that morning that the nice lady boss wanted to meet her, carefully watching her reaction for any signs of anxiety. Is she coming to our house? Sophie asked, looking up from her cereal. No, we're meeting her at the park. She wants to see you play and maybe get ice cream after. Is that okay? Sophie considered this with the serious expression she used when processing important information. Will she like me? The question broke Liam's heart a little. Sweetheart, she's going to love you. How could she not? Mommy didn't love me enough to stay. The words hit like a physical blow. They'd never talked about it directly. Sophie had been too young when her mother left to really understand, and Liam had tried to shield her from the pain. But apparently she'd been processing it all along, developing her own conclusions about why one parent had walked away. Liam knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. Sophie, listen to me. Your mother leaving had nothing to do with you. You are wonderful and smart and funny and kind. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love. Not because those people aren't lovable, but because the grown-ups are struggling with their own problems. That's what happened with your mom. It wasn't your fault. But what if the lady boss leaves too? She might, Liam said honestly, because he refused to make promises he couldn't keep. People don't always stay forever, but that's not because of anything wrong with you. And right now, she really wants to meet you. Can we give her a chance? Sophie thought about it, then nodded slowly. Okay. But Daddy? If she's mean, we can leave, right? Absolutely. You don't like her. We go home. No questions asked. Okay. Sophie went back to her cereal, apparently satisfied with this arrangement. Liam texted Ava. She's nervous but willing. Fair warning, she's going to test you. Kids do that when they're scared of being left. Great. No pressure then. You're going to be fine. Just be yourself. The real you, not the CEO version. What if the real me isn't good with kids? Then we'll figure it out, together. They met at the park at 11, Ava arriving in jeans and a sweater that made her look more like a person than a billionaire. She'd left her hair down, minimal makeup, nothing that screamed power or wealth. Just Ava, looking nervous and trying to hide it. Sophie held Liam's hand tightly as they approached, her eyes fixed on this stranger who mattered to Daddy in some grown-up way she didn't fully understand. Hi, Ava said, kneeling down to Sophie's level with an awkwardness that was almost endearing. You must be Sophie. Your dad has told me a lot about you. Sophie studied her with the brutal honesty of childhood. You're prettier than in my picture. Ava blinked, surprised. You drew a picture of me? Daddy said you liked pictures, so I made you one. Do you want to see? I'd love to see it. Sophie pulled a folded paper from Liam's pocket. He'd been carrying it just in case, and handed it over solemnly. This one showed 3 stick figures holding hands, Daddy, Sophie, and a woman with long dark hair labeled Miss Ava. Ava stared at the drawing for a long moment, and Liam saw her eyes get bright with emotion. When she looked up at Sophie, her voice was rough. This is beautiful, thank you. You're in the middle because Daddy said you're important, Sophie explained with childlike logic. Important people go in the middle. I'm honored. Ava carefully folded the picture and tucked it in her pocket. Do you like swings? I haven't been on a swing in probably 20 years. You haven't been on a swing in 20 years? Sophie's voice was scandalized. That's so sad. Come on, I'll show you. She grabbed Ava's hand and pulled her toward the playground, her earlier nervousness apparently forgotten. Liam followed, watching Ava try to navigate this alien world of playgrounds and children with the same focused intensity she brought to board meetings. It was awkward at first. Ava pushed Sophie on the swings too gently, then too hard when Sophie asked for higher. She didn't know the rules of the elaborate game Sophie invented involving the slide and a dragon. She looked genuinely panicked when Sophie asked her to help with the monkey bars, but she tried. That was what mattered to Liam, watching Ava push past her discomfort and uncertainty to engage with his daughter. She asked Sophie questions about her favorite colors and her drawings and what she wanted to be when she grew up. She listened to Sophie's rambling stories about daycare with genuine interest instead of the polite tolerance most adults showed. And slowly, Sophie started to warm up. She showed Ava her favorite hiding spot under the slide, explained the complex social hierarchy of the playground, asked Ava if she wanted to see how high she could climb. After an hour, they moved to the ice cream shop nearby. Sophie ordered chocolate with rainbow sprinkles, Ava got vanilla, and Liam stuck with his usual coffee flavor. They sat at a small table outside, Sophie swinging her legs and eating her ice cream with the intensity only a 4-year-old could bring to frozen dessert. Miss Ava? Sophie said suddenly, looking up with chocolate smeared around her mouth. Are you my daddy's girlfriend? Liam nearly choked on his ice cream. They'd agreed not to define the relationship yet, to let Sophie get comfortable first, but apparently Sophie had her own timeline. Ava glanced at Liam, then back at Sophie. Would that be okay with you if I was? Sophie considered this seriously. Do you make him happy? I try to. Does he seem happy to you? Happier than before. He smiles more now, and he doesn't look so tired all the time. Sophie took another bite of ice cream. So I guess it's okay. But you have to promise not to leave. Daddy gets sad when people leave. The simple statement carried the weight of a child who'd watched one parent disappear and lived in fear of losing the other. Ava's expression softened into something achingly tender. Sophie, I can't promise I'll never leave because grown-ups can't always control what happens in life. But I can promise that if I do leave, it won't be because of you. You're wonderful, and your daddy is wonderful. And right now, I'm very happy to know both of you. It wasn't a perfect answer. It didn't give Sophie the guarantee she wanted. But it was honest, and somehow that mattered more. Sophie nodded slowly, apparently satisfied. Okay. Can you help me with my puzzle? Daddy's terrible at puzzles, and we've been stuck on the same piece for 3 days. Ava laughed, genuine and surprised. I can try. I'm pretty good at puzzles, actually. Good, because this one has 1,000 pieces, and it's really hard. The conversation moved on to easier topics. Sophie's favorite TV shows, Ava's admission that she'd never actually watched any of them, Sophie's scandalized reaction that Ava had been missing out on the most important cultural touchstones of the modern age. Liam watched them interact with something warm spreading through his chest. It wasn't perfect. Ava was still awkward, still clearly out of her depth with children. Sophie was still testing, still watching for signs that this new person might disappear like her mother had. But they were trying, both of them reaching across the divide of age and experience to find common ground. When they finally headed home, Sophie fell asleep in the car within 5 minutes, exhausted from the excitement. Ava had followed them in her own car, and now she stood with Liam in the parking lot of his apartment building, looking uncertain. How did I do? She asked quietly. You were perfect. I wasn't. I was awkward, and I didn't know the rules, and I probably said the wrong things. You were honest. You tried. You treated her like a person instead of just a kid. That's what matters. Liam took her hand. She liked you. I could tell. She's testing me, seeing if I'm going to stick around. Yeah, she does that. Her mother leaving messed her up more than I realized. Liam's voice was rough. I didn't know she'd internalized it like that she thinks it was her fault. It wasn't her fault. You know that, right? And you've done an amazing job raising her alone. Some days it doesn't feel amazing. Some days it feels like I'm barely keeping my head above water and hoping I'm not screwing her up too badly. Ava stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest. You're a good father, Liam. She's happy and healthy and confident. That doesn't happen by accident. I want her to have more than just me. I want her to have stability and people who care about her and... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. And what? And maybe a family that's bigger than just the two of us. If that's something you'd want. Eventually. No pressure, Ava kissed him, cutting off his rambling explanation. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. I want that too, she said quietly. It terrifies me, but I want it. The family thing, the stability thing, all of it. She paused. But Liam, I need you to know I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to work too much or forget important things or be terrible at the domestic stuff because I've never done it before. I'm going to disappoint you both. And I'm going to be broke sometimes and stressed about money, and probably overprotective of Sophie because I'm scared of losing her. I'm going to disappoint you too. Liam pulled her closer. But we'll figure it out. That's what people who love each other do. Love each other, Ava repeated softly. You said that in the board meeting. I haven't said it back yet. You don't have to... I love you. The words came out fierce and certain. I love you, and it scares me, and I don't know how to do this, but I love you anyway. Liam kissed her again, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. Come up? He asked. Sophie's asleep, but we could watch a movie or just talk, or... I'd like that. They spent the evening on Liam's worn couch, Sophie sleeping in the next room, talking about everything and nothing. Ava told him about the puzzle she and Sophie had referenced, apparently a 1,000-piece monstrosity of the solar system that Sophie had gotten obsessed with. Liam shared stories about Sophie's toddler years, the chaos and joy of raising a child alone. It felt domestic, normal, like they were building something real instead of just surviving the storm. Around 10, Ava's phone buzzed with an email marked urgent. She glanced at it, sighed, and put the phone face down on the table. "Work?" Liam asked. "The board. They want a meeting Monday to discuss the restructuring plan. You should go. This is important. It can wait until tomorrow. Right now I'm here. With you. That's more important." The choice was small but significant. The old Ava would have jumped on the email immediately, sacrificing personal time for professional demands. This Ava was learning that not everything required immediate response. "I'm proud of you," Liam said. "For ignoring work emails, that's a low bar. For choosing to be present, for letting yourself have this." Ava leaned against him, her head on his shoulder in an echo of that moment in the boardroom that had started everything. "This is still weird, right? Us being together, the CEO and the former assistant. Incredibly weird, also kind of perfect. How do you figure? Because we saw each other at our worst and chose each other anyway. You saw me collapse from exhaustion. I saw you fight your own board. We've already been through the hard stuff. Everything else is just details." I like that logic. Ava tilted her head up to look at him. "What happens now? We just keep doing this? Dating and figuring it out as we go?" "Pretty much. Unless you have a better plan." "I don't. Plans are your thing. I'm better at improvising." They stayed like that until nearly midnight, when Ava reluctantly said she needed to go home. Liam walked her to her car, stealing one more kiss before she left. "Thank you," Ava said, "for today, for introducing me to Sophie, for trusting me with something that matters so much. Thank you for being brave enough to try. I'll see you tomorrow? Dinner at your place? I'll bring Sophie if you want. We could order pizza and work on that puzzle." Ava smiled, soft and genuine. "I'd like that. Fair warning, I'm terrible at puzzles despite what I told Sophie. Good thing we're both terrible at them. We'll suffer together." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Liam worked his new job with hours that actually allowed him to have a life. Ava navigated the board's continued scrutiny while slowly learning how to delegate and trust her team. And together, they figured out how to build a relationship that included a 4-year-old who had opinions about everything. Sophie warmed to Ava gradually, testing her with questions and requests and small demands that were really just ways of checking if this new person would stay. Ava rose to each challenge with determination that was sometimes clumsy but always sincere. She learned the rules of Sophie's elaborate pretend games, figured out that mac and cheese had to be the specific brand or Sophie wouldn't eat it, discovered that bedtime stories required specific voices for specific characters, and deviation from the script was not acceptable. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they became something that looked like a family. It wasn't perfect. Ava still worked too much, sometimes forgetting dinner plans or showing up an hour late because a meeting ran over. Liam still stressed about money, even though his new job paid well, and the financial pressure had eased. Sophie still had moments where she tested Ava's commitment, asking pointed questions about whether Miss Ava was going to leave like Mommy did. But they navigated each rough patch with honesty and patience. Ava learned to set boundaries with work, to say no to weekend calls and late-night emergencies that weren't actually emergencies. Liam learned to accept help without feeling like it made him weak or dependent. Sophie learned that family could look different than she'd imagined, and that was okay. 2 months after that first park visit, Liam came home from work to find Ava and Sophie sitting at his kitchen table surrounded by puzzle pieces. They'd finally finished the solar system puzzle, all 1,000 pieces assembled into a complete image of planets and stars. "Daddy, look!" Sophie shouted when he walked in. "We finished! Miss Ava found the last piece." "I see that. It looks amazing. Can we frame it? I want to keep it forever." Ava caught Liam's eye over Sophie's head, her expression soft. "I think we can arrange that." They ordered pizza and celebrated the puzzle completion with ice cream, Sophie chattering excitedly about which planet was her favorite and why. After dinner, while Ava helped Sophie with her bath, Liam stood in his kitchen and felt something settle in his chest. This was his life now. Not the chaos of drowning in work and bills, not the isolation of doing everything alone. This was partnership and shared responsibilities and someone to help with bedtime routines. This was what he'd been fighting for without realizing it. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Ava found him on the couch staring at the framed puzzle they'd hung on the wall. "You okay?" she asked, settling beside him. "Yeah, just thinking." About? About how 6 months ago I was falling asleep in board meetings because I couldn't keep my eyes open. And now I'm here, with you, with Sophie, happy and healthy, and it feels almost too good to be real. "It's real," Ava said quietly. "Messy and imperfect and real." "I love you," Liam said, the words coming easier now that he'd had practice saying them. "I love you too. Both of you." Ava hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "The board has been pushing me to name a successor, someone who could take over if anything happened or if I decided to step back from daily operations. I've been resisting because it felt like giving up control." She turned to look at him directly. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe having someone I trust in that position would let me actually have a life outside of work. Are you thinking about stepping down?" "Not completely, but maybe stepping back, delegating more, spending less time fighting the board and more time building things that actually matter." She gestured around his apartment. "Things like this. Like us." Liam felt hope bloom in his chest, dangerous and bright. "What would that look like?" "I don't know yet, but I want to find out. With you. With Sophie. With whatever version of family we're building here." "That sounds terrifying." "It is. But the good kind of terrifying. The kind that means you're choosing something instead of just surviving." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Liam's arm around Ava's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sound of Sophie's breathing from the bedroom and the distant noise of the city outside. "Move in with me," Liam said suddenly, the words surprising even himself. Ava lifted her head to look at him. "What?" "Move in. Or we move into your place, I don't care which, but let's stop pretending we're just dating. Let's actually do this, build a life together." "Liam, that's huge. We've only been together for 3 months, and I've never been more sure of anything. You love me. I love you. Sophie loves you. We're already doing the family thing. We're just doing it across 2 apartments. Why not make it official?" Ava looked scared and excited in equal measure. "What about the board? They're still watching. Let them watch. We're not doing anything wrong. We're 2 people in love building a life together. If they have a problem with that, that's their issue, not ours." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Everything else is just noise." Liam took her hand. "I'm not saying it'll be perfect. We're going to fight and mess up and struggle to figure out how to merge our lives. But I'd rather struggle together than keep playing it safe apart." Ava was quiet for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly working through variables and risks. Finally, she smiled, a real smile, full and genuine. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, let's do it. Let's move in together and terrify the board and build this imperfect, messy life together." She paused. "But we're getting a bigger place. This apartment is too small for 3 people and all of Sophie's toys." Liam laughed, pulling her closer. "Deal. We'll find something perfect for us." "Nothing's perfect." "Then we'll find something good enough, and we'll make it work." They told Sophie the next morning over pancakes. Liam had worried she might be upset or confused by the change, but her reaction was pure 4-year-old logic. "Does this mean Miss Ava will be here all the time?" Sophie asked. "Pretty much," Liam said. "Is that okay?" Sophie thought about it seriously. "Will she help with bedtime stories?" "I can definitely help with bedtime stories," Ava confirmed. "And puzzles?" "Yes, puzzles too." "And will you leave like Mommy did?" The question hung in the air, heavy with a child's fear. Ava knelt down to Sophie's level, her expression serious. "Sophie, I can't promise that nothing will ever go wrong. Life is complicated, and sometimes things change. But I can promise that I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing your dad, and I'm choosing you. And I'm going to keep choosing you for as long as you'll let me, okay?" Sophie studied her with those 2 wise eyes, then nodded slowly. "Okay," But you have to promise one more thing. What's that? You have to learn all the voices for my bedtime stories. Daddy does them wrong, and it's very annoying. Ava laughed, surprised and delighted. I promise to learn all the voices, even the annoying ones. Good. Then you can move in. Just like that, it was decided. They spent the next month house hunting, looking for a place that could accommodate all three of them, plus Ava's books and Liam's practical furniture, and Sophie's ever-expanding collection of toys and art supplies. They found it in a renovated brownstone with good schools nearby, and enough space for everyone to have their own room plus a shared living area that felt like home. The board found out about the move when Ava updated her emergency contact information and residential address. David Chen called her into a meeting that Liam was not invited to, but Ava came home that evening with a satisfied smile. What happened? Liam asked. They threatened to call another vote on my position, said I was making a mockery of professional boundaries. So I told them that my personal life is no longer up for debate, and if they want to remove me, they should be prepared for the shareholders to revolt because I just closed the largest deal in company history. She kicked off her heels and collapsed on their new couch. They backed down. Again. I think they're finally getting the message that I'm not going anywhere. You closed the largest deal in company history? Did I forget to mention that? The European expansion went better than projected. We're up 40% in 3 territories and expanding into 4 more. Turns out delegating to competent people works. Liam sat beside her, amazed and proud in equal measure. You're incredible. I'm learning. There's a difference. Ava leaned into him. How was your day? Good. Picked up Sophie from her new school. She made friends with a girl named Emma, who apparently has the same exact backpack, and therefore they're now best friends forever. The logic of 4-year-olds. It's airtight. Who are we to question it? They fell into an easy rhythm in the new house. Mornings were chaos. Liam making breakfast while Ava helped Sophie get ready for school, all 3 of them moving around each other in a dance that was still being choreographed but felt increasingly natural. Evenings were for homework and dinner and family time that looked nothing like traditional, but felt right. Ava was still learning to be domestic. She burned dinner regularly, forgot the kids needed baths multiple times per week, and had to be reminded that bedtime was a firm rule, not a suggestion. But she tried with a determination that was almost fierce, treating the challenge of family life with the same focus she brought to corporate negotiations. And slowly, imperceptibly, the walls she'd built to protect herself came down. She started working from home more, scheduling her days around Sophie's school events and dance recitals. She learned to say no to weekend calls and late-night emergencies. She built a life that included more than just quarterly earnings and board meetings. 6 months after moving in together, Liam came home from work to find Ava and Sophie in the living room surrounded by art supplies. Sophie was covered in paint, her latest masterpiece spread across the coffee table. Ava sat beside her, equally paint-splattered, helping to add details to what appeared to be a family portrait. What's this? Liam asked, setting down his briefcase. We're making a picture for the wall, Sophie announced. Because Miss Ava said we should have family pictures, and we don't have any good ones. We could have just hired a photographer, Liam pointed out. Where's the fun in that? Ava said, grinning. Besides, Sophie's artistic vision is very specific. She says you need to be wearing your blue shirt because it's her favorite. The blue shirt is currently at the dry cleaners. Then you'll have to wear it in spirit. Liam looked at the painting taking shape. 3 figures holding hands, a house in the background, a sun that took up half the sky because Sophie believed in ambitious celestial bodies. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. Can I help? He asked. You have to do the dog, Sophie said. Because we're getting a dog, and Miss Ava can't draw dogs. She made it look like a potato. We are not getting a dog, Ava said firmly. We're totally getting a dog, Liam said at the same time. Ava looked at him with exasperated affection. You're both going to gang up on me, aren't you? Probably, Liam admitted. But you love us anyway. Unfortunately, I do. That night, after Sophie was in bed and they'd cleaned up the paint disaster, Liam and Ava stood in their kitchen drinking wine and talking about their days. It was domestic and ordinary, and everything Liam had once thought was impossible. I've been thinking, Ava said slowly, about making some changes at work. What kind of changes? I'm promoting Daniel Chen to COO, giving him operational control of day-to-day functions. I'll still be CEO, still make the big decisions, but I won't be drowning in minutiae anymore. She looked at him. It means I'll have more time. For this? For us. For actually being present instead of just physically here while mentally at the office. Are you sure? You love that company. I do. But I love this more. And I'm finally realizing I can have both, just not in the way I used to do it. Ava set down her wine glass. I spent 10 years building an empire and forgetting to build a life. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be here for Sophie's recitals. I want to have dinner with you without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I want to actually live instead of just working. Liam pulled her close, overwhelmed by how far they'd both come from that moment in the boardroom. I'm proud of you. For what? For choosing this. For letting yourself want something beyond professional success. You made it safe to want more. Both of you. Ava rested her head against his chest. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be living with a former employee and his daughter, covered in paint and arguing about getting a dog, I would have thought they were insane. But this is the happiest I've ever been. Even with the board drama and the media scrutiny and all the complications, especially with all of that, because it's real, it's messy and imperfect and real. They stood there in their kitchen, holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the city lights sparkled through the windows, and Liam felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what he'd been fighting for all along. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Not just getting through each day, but building something that mattered. The next morning, Sophie came running into their bedroom at 6 a.m., jumping on the bed with the boundless energy of children who didn't understand the concept of sleeping in. Wake up! It's Saturday and we're supposed to go to the zoo, and I want to see the penguins, Ava groaned, burying her face in the pillow. It's too early for penguins. It's never too early for penguins, Sophie declared with absolute certainty. Liam laughed, pulling Sophie between them. She settled in immediately, chattering about all the animals she wanted to see and whether they could get cotton candy even though it wasn't healthy. Can I ask you something? Ava said to Sophie, her voice still rough with sleep. Okay. How would you feel if I officially became part of your family? Like, not just living here, but actually being family? Sophie looked at her with those serious eyes. Aren't you already family? The simple question made both adults pause. Liam felt his throat tighten with emotion. I am, Ava said softly. But I wanted to make sure you thought so too. Of course you're family. You live here and you help with homework and you do bedtime stories with the right voices now. That's what family does. Sophie paused, then added, plus you love Daddy and he loves you and you both love me. So we're definitely family. When did you get so smart? Liam asked. I was always smart. You just didn't notice because you were too tired all the time. But you're not tired anymore. She was right. Liam couldn't remember the last time he'd felt that bone-deep exhaustion that had defined his life before Ava. He had energy for Sophie's endless questions, for weekend zoo trips, for building the life he'd once thought was impossible. All right, Ava said, sitting up and accepting defeat. Let's go see some penguins, but I need coffee first. Deal. I'll make you coffee. Sophie scrambled out of bed and ran toward the kitchen. She's 4. She can't make coffee, Liam started. She's pouring water into a cup and calling it coffee. Let her have it. Ava smiled, stretching. This is our life now. Fake coffee and early morning zoo trips and absolutely no sleeping in on weekends. Sounds perfect. It kind of is. They spent the day at the zoo, Sophie darting between exhibits while Ava and Liam followed hand in hand. They ate overpriced food and bought Sophie a stuffed penguin that she declared was her new best friend. They took photos that were blurry and imperfect, and exactly what a family photo should be. On the way home, Sophie fell asleep in the car, clutching her penguin. Ava drove while Liam sat in the passenger seat, watching the city slide past. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being brave enough to try this. For not running away when it got hard. For loving us even when we're messy and complicated. Thank you for seeing past the Ice Queen. For believing I could be more than just a CEO. For giving me a reason to want to be more. They drove in comfortable silence the rest of the way home, carrying Sophie inside and tucking her into bed, still clutching her penguin. Then they collapsed on the couch, exhausted but content. We should probably talk about the future at some point, Ava said. About what comes next. What do you want to come next? Honestly, more of this. More family time and zoo trips and Sophie's art projects all over the house. Maybe eventually making it official, getting married or whatever the legal equivalent is so that if anything happens to you, I can take care of Sophie. So that we're a family on paper, not just in practice. Liam turned to look at her, his heart pounding. Are you proposing? I'm saying I want a future with you, however that looks. Whenever you're ready. I'm ready now. You're sure? We've only been together for 8 months. I fell in love with you when you kept Sophie's drawing. I knew I wanted this when you helped me instead of firing me. Everything since then has just been confirmation. Liam took her hand. I don't need more time to know you're what I want. You and Sophie building this life together. That's my future. Ava's eyes were bright with tears. I love you, both of you. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. Then let's make it official. Not today, not this week, but soon. Let's stop pretending this is temporary and commit to building something permanent. Okay, Ava whispered. Okay, yes, let's do it. They sat there holding each other while the evening darkened into night, planning a future that was still uncertain but felt solid in ways that mattered. They'd weathered the board's scrutiny, the media attention, the doubts and fears and complications. They'd chosen each other again and again, even when it would have been easier to walk away. And now they were choosing forever. 6 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at their house with just Sophie, Marcus, Eleanor Vance, and a few close friends. Sophie was the flower girl and took her job very seriously, making sure every petal was placed exactly right. Ava wore a simple dress instead of a designer gown, and Liam wore the blue shirt that was Sophie's favorite. The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by a judge who'd agreed to keep the whole thing low-key. When they exchanged vows, they didn't make grand promises about perfection or forever. They promised to choose each other, to keep trying, to build something real even when it was hard. Sophie stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, and when the judge pronounced them married, she cheered louder than anyone. The board found out the next week when Ava updated her beneficiary information in legal documents. There was some grumbling, some concern about optics, but the fight had gone out of them. Ava had proven she could run the company and have a personal life. The numbers spoke for themselves. David Chen sent a card that simply said, "Congratulations," which Ava considered a victory. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Liam continued at Titan Industries, building his own career independent of Ava's shadow. Ava delegated more at Sinclair Technologies, trusting her team and actually taking weekends off. Sophie thrived in her new school, made friends, and stopped asking if people were going to leave. They got the dog, a rescue named Rocket, who Sophie loved with fierce devotion. They took family vacations and had Sunday dinners and dealt with the normal chaos of life, bills and homework and household repairs and all the mundane details that made up a real existence. And through it all, they kept choosing each other. On hard days when Ava worked late and Liam felt the old resentment creeping back, they chose to communicate instead of shutting down. When Sophie had nightmares about abandonment, they both showed up to reassure her that family meant staying. When the board tried one more time to question Ava's judgment, Liam stood beside her and they faced it together. It wasn't perfect. It was never going to be perfect. But it was theirs. Messy and real and built on a foundation of two people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to build something that mattered. 1 year after their wedding, Liam came home to find Ava and Sophie in the living room working on another puzzle. This one was 2,000 pieces, an ambitious landscape that Sophie had insisted they could handle. "How's it going?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "We found all the edge pieces," Sophie reported. Mom says that's always the first step." Liam's heart caught at the casual way Sophie used mom now, like it had always been that way. Ava had suggested Sophie call her whatever felt comfortable, and Sophie had tried out various options before settling on mom with the same certainty she brought to everything. "Smart strategy," Liam said, sitting down to join them. "Need help?" "Always," Ava said, smiling at him over Sophie's head. "You can start on the sky. Sophie insists it's the hardest part." "The sky is all blue. How am I supposed to tell the pieces apart?" Sophie's indignation was adorable. "Very carefully," Liam said, ruffling her hair. They worked on the puzzle together, the three of them, while Rocket dozed on the couch and music played softly in the background. It was ordinary and domestic, and everything Liam had once thought was impossible. This was the life they'd built. Not through grand gestures or perfect planning, but through daily choices to show up, to try, to keep building even when it was hard. They'd started from a moment of collapse. Liam falling asleep on Ava's shoulder, both of them drowning in their separate lonely worlds, and somehow found their way to this, to family dinners and puzzle nights, and a future that stretched out bright with possibility, to choosing each other every single day and building something that was messy and imperfect and absolutely real, to love that had survived boardroom battles and media scrutiny and all the forces that had tried to tear them apart, to home, finally, after years of just surviving. Liam looked at Ava across the puzzle pieces, caught her eye, and smiled. She smiled back, and in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that they'd made it. Not to some fantasy of perfection, but to something better, to a life built on truth and choice and the courage to keep trying. Sophie found another edge piece and cheered, breaking the moment. Rocket lifted his head, decided nothing interesting was happening, and went back to sleep. The puzzle slowly took shape on the table, piece by piece, just like the life they were building together. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.